Okay, good morning everyone. I'd like to call to order this budget meeting of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores and welcome everybody to the Council Chambers this morning. First item is the disclosure of pecuniary interest, and I'll ask any member if they have a pecuniary interest with anything that they would like to declare. Seeing none, of course, you can declare one anytime if you need to. That moves us on to item 3, the overview, and I'll turn it over to the CEO to begin the presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, members of council and staff and media. I'm delighted to be here today to speak to council about the 2019 operating budget. We have a lot of staff that will be participating throughout the day. We've opened up the invitation to all of our staff to pop in during the day to see how budget works and see how council interacts. And it's an important day for all of us, and I wanted to make sure that staff felt included in this. Due to the election, our budget meeting is a little bit later this year than we typically have, and there's some advantages and disadvantages to that, but we're excited about moving forward. Our Director of Corporate Services, Sue Murray, will be leading most of the presentation, and each director or each department head will have the opportunity to speak about their division. There are some very key messages that you may hear repeated throughout the day, and that's by design, quite frankly, because there are certain ones that we want to stick, and hopefully they will. We are in a service business. We don't buy lumber to make furniture. We don't buy products and resell them. We provide services for people, and we do it with people. Most of our costs are in people, and that's an investment. In our operating, most of what we do is in our operating budget. Most of what is in there is business continuity. It's keeping the business operating. It's clearing roads. It's picking up garbage. It's making sure swimming lessons happen, water bills get out. There's a lot of things that happen on a day-to-day basis, and our operating budget generally reflects that. In capital budget, you'll see more projects and that type of thing, but operating is running the business, and that's on a daily basis. So in our operating budget, there's not lots of sizzle. It generally doesn't make lots of headlines, but they're important, and they help to make sure that Saugeen Shores is the fastest growing community in our region and is ranked as one of the best places to live in Canada. Today is the first step in the budget process. Staff have been working for a number of months on it, but Sue will provide an overview. Department heads will then make a short presentation, and you'll have an opportunity to ask any questions as we go. So there will be stops as we go for elected officials to answer questions. Today is, as I mentioned, I think in our orientation, it's not a memory test. Our goal is to give you the best answers we possibly can and help you make informed decisions. So thank you very much for the many questions that we've received to date, and we look forward to the questions that you have today. And we'll do our best to answer them, and if we can't, we'll tell you that, and we'll make sure that you get the answers before the final budget approval, which will be coming. After today, staff will take your direction, combine it with the direction we receive as part of the capital budget meeting, and create a final budget for your approval. So today you're not really approving anything, you're giving us direction to go forward on the way to that final approval. You will be asked to vote on some things today, and those things are to get us, give staff direction to include those items in the final budget. But at the end of the day, the final budget approval will come sometime after the capital budget when we combine those two, because in some cases they intertwine, and then we'll bring back a final report to council. There are still a number of variables at play, but generally if you agree what is presented today, both in this current budget and the additional requests that are in your package, if you approved all of those, we should be in the range of about a 3 point something, low 3 point something blended tax increase. So that's the context. I want to make that clear. As we go through, in particular, the additional items, if you're saying yes, 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 if you said yes to all of them, they end up probably around 3% plus or minus blended tax increase. So don't feel that if you're saying yes, 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 you're going to end up at a 50% tax increase or something like that. We took the long list, as I've communicated, of needs and wants. We took the long list and narrowed it down to the few items. We've felt that over the past couple of years and feedback we've got from council, that seems to work well. Let's really focus our attention on the few items rather than starting with 40 requests and cutting from that. And it's encouraging that we're able to do this because of growth, but it also, one of the items you'll see is an increase in the annual contribution to the legacy fund of another $500,000. So that's significant in moving us to where we want to be. I'd like to thank our staff, particularly those working in finance, for their hard work and expertise in getting us this far. They've been short-staffed for all of 2018 and most of 2017, and we just recently filled that. So they're finally fully staffed up, and they've been doing yeoman's work. Not exactly sure what that means, but it sounds good. They've been doing yeoman's work at getting us to the spot we're at. And Mr. Mayor and members of council, thank you for your continued support. I'm proud of the effort that staff have invested to get us where we are today, and I'm appreciative, and I share with staff of the continued support we get from our elected officials. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll turn it over to, I guess that moves on to item number 4, Corporate Services, Revenue, Governance, and Administration, and Sue Murray, the Director of Corporate Services, has that presentation.
Thank you. I thought first we'd just go through a few sort of overview slides of the budget. So this budget represents management's best estimate of the cost of operating and ongoing operations of the municipality by maintaining the current level of service. Minor enhancements have been added, and effort has been invested in recalibrating some budget lines to better reflect actuals. And additional requests that are presented separately at the end are not included in these numbers. The goals of this budget are to meet citizens' expectations in both short and long-term goals, to present a reasonable and thoughtful budget requests, to provide council and the community with an overview of the proposed budget, to demonstrate good value for taxpayer money, and to answer questions council may have, and to receive your direction and to inform the final budget. And the last goal is to advance the fees and charges information for approval next week, especially in the two areas that in Jane's department, the harbor and tourist camp. The proposed levy increase, as David has mentioned, due to the election year of both Bruce County and the school board rates have been finalized or not finalized yet. Last year we did get the school board rates right at the end of the year, December 21st. This year I've not had any formal notification yet from the school boards as to what their rates will be in 2019. And Bruce County has not finalized their budgets. So based on this, I have made some assumptions which I'll go further in another slide. As David has mentioned, in 2018 the budget, capital and operating budget, was approved with a blended tax rate of 3%. And this proposal should be representing the same methodology, so should come close, plus or minus, probably to that 3% as well. And as these variables become known, it will allow staff to finalize the impact of the tax rates and the amounts available to be transferred to the legacy reserve. A proposed blended tax rate, estimated at 3% increase for residential and farm properties, would result in an approximate increase of $102.60 for the average household assessment of about $310,000. I believe in last year's budget, the average assessment was estimated to be just over $280. I took this year's assessment and it increased a bit, obviously. So these are the risks and assumptions that you'll find throughout the budget this year. I have estimated a 4% levy increase from Bruce County and a 0% increase in the school board rates. I've also assumed the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund will have no increase. We did receive a letter, which I believe Luke shared with council, right before Christmas. So basically indicating that they're hoping to get our 2019 allocation out as soon as possible. And there are no additional staff except where identified in the budget in these slides. Some other major risks and assumptions. I assumed an average 5% increase for insurance. Majority of fees and charges have increased by 2.5%. Minimal increases in payroll deductions, EHT, employer health tax, Canada Pension Plan, and employer insurance. I've assumed a 2% increase in our other benefit costs, so health, dental, long-term disability, life insurance, and dependent life. And I also reviewed our utilities expenditure lines and sort of reviewed and increased where necessary. So the fees and charges are at the back of the package that you were given. The bulk of the majority of fees are increased by 2.5%, as I mentioned earlier, and the majority of these fees will be addressed within each area. So some of the budget pressures that we face are, as David says, we are in a service industry, so there is an economic adjustment of 2.75 for non-union, 2.75 for other positions included in the Union of Operating Engineers. Council remuneration has increased based on the council remuneration report presented in 2018, and the salaries and benefits increased as well. So I did a full review of the salaries and benefits, which I have further reallocated based on my analysis of how the payroll is allocating wages and benefits. And I took a 2-year sort of, as some of the salaries and benefits are allocated based on where they're actually working, so they're budget across multiple departments based on where their actual hours lie. So in order for me to allocate those wages, I took the last 2 years and averaged those 2 years to allocate those wages into those departments. So, because right now some of the hourly staff, especially in infrastructure and development, will have a home payroll department, but their wages get allocated over multiple departments. So when I allocated those wages this year, I based it on the last 2 years' actuals, which is why you'll see a bit of a swing in the wage allocations again. And I just wanted to show, again, the operating expense breakdown. So 44% is in salaries and benefits. We have about 11% materials. Contracts and services are 16%. Utilities average about 5%. Our debt payments are 5%, and external transfers are 2%. That's odd, because that's not what I'm seeing on my other slide. I'm like, Okay. That slide was not correct. So, and I just wanted to show how the breakdown in your revenue sources are.
Sue, can I just jump in for a sec? So if you go back to the slide you were just at, it's not displaying correctly, but I think everyone's got a hard copy of the slide in front of you. So it printed correctly. But if you just want to take a look at it, it does speak to wages and benefits and how they're distributed throughout the organization. So you do just, again, if you do have hard copy, so...
it's going to be hard to see on their little hard copy. Smaller. So anyways, we did break up the wage and benefits amongst sort of our main departments. And hopefully you can read it. Our protective services is 10%, police is 28%, community services is 20%, corporate services is 8%, infrastructure and development is 27%, and the clerks and CIO office represent 7% of our wages and benefits. And our revenue sources, as I just mentioned earlier, are recorded split that way, which the breakdown's fairly similar to last year. I also wanted to share a couple of slides. The Town of Saugeen Shores participates in the BMA Management Consulting Municipal Study, and this BMA Consulting Incorporated completes a comparative study on behalf of participating Ontario municipalities. And there were 108 municipalities that were in this survey, and they represent in excess of 85% of the population in Ontario. So it kind of just gives us a picture of the magnitude of the comparison. And this analysis is completed using the most recent current value assessment, tax policy, levy bylaws, development charges, water sewer rates, financial information returns, user fees, and economic development programs. And these indicators help evaluate each municipality's existing financial condition and identify future challenges and opportunities. But I just wanted to highlight just a couple of information sheets. Within the document, it is quite a large document. I have not had an opportunity to read the full document. It came out in late December. So this chart here shows a comparison of relative tax comparison for residential properties. And it's broken down between low, medium, mid, high, and high. As you can see, Saugeen Shores is highlighted with the red box, and we are still in the low category, which is the same category we were in last year. So it kind of just gives us a snapshot of where we are in comparison to other municipalities in Ontario. The next slide, I took a snippet of the information, and it's the 2018 relative taxes payable on a detached bungalow. So it ranks it from the lowest to the highest, and we are pretty close to the top there on the low. I also showed you the sort of the three 16, 17, and 18 data from the study as well, just to give you a range of sort of what the minimum taxes are, the maximum taxes are, and the average and the median. So the median is sort of the middle point of the 108, and the average is the average of the 108 municipalities. So you see there is a significant range between the smallest to the largest, but we are right up there on the low. And this is the average estimated household income in Southwest Ontario. Ironically enough, in 2018, our Saugeen Shores estimated household income has actually decreased over 2017. I would assume that rate has decreased due to the fact that the population is growing, but probably, obviously, the household incomes are not as high as they were in the prior years. I just wanted to highlight a bit of the tax assessment information that we currently have in Saugeen Shores. So this is your 2019 assessment breakdown, just to give you sort of an idea of where the taxes are coming from. So 87.84% of the taxes are residential, and commercial is 5.59. Farmlands is 4.38, multi-residential is 1.77, and pipelines, managed forest, and industrial are significantly less. It just sort of gives you an idea of where your tax revenues are coming from. And I sort of wanted to show you, this sheet just shows you the estimated growth revenue, tax revenue in your residential and multi-residential properties over the last 4 years. So you can see that in 2019, it's estimated to be 467,000. That number's a little hard to read. And it was 386,000 the prior year. So it just sort of shows that trend of the assessment growth that we're seeing. And now we're back to the documents within your budget package. So I just wanted to
take some questions.
Yeah.
We'll just open it up at this moment. We're going to move in now into the actual corporate services reports. Are there any questions for David or for Sue at this moment? Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sue, so that was interesting, showing that we're on the highest of the lowest tax rates and that sort of thing. But those would be based on the previous assessment that you used, 280,000 or so, right? So this year you're estimating 310,000. Was that so that might put us in a different position on the list, right? And then that's also based on the mill rate. Is that right? But as opposed, well, I guess this slide here is actually on the per household, isn't it? So I guess it's an encouraging number to say that we're paying lowest, or one of the lowest in the province for per household. But by no means that should give us license to try and increase it to get us into the mid-range either, right? So yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
Any further questions or comments at this moment? I guess I was going to ask Sue, is that, like you cut that snippet out, that 2018 relative taxes, is that actually the bottom of the low list? Are we the seventh lowest taxes in the province?
Yes, that's correct.
And with high estimated household income, I just would point out that with regard to that letter on OMPF that we got just before December, I think council would be wise to enter this budget with a strong assumption that rate that may actually come down, that OMPF number might actually come down. I got the strong impression from the letter from the minister that they were looking to find savings in the OMPF, and given our situation that I just rated there, seventh lowest taxes in the province, a high per household income, I think we're at great risk to be among those who would see reductions in the OMPF. That's not a for sure thing, but I think maintaining that in the forefront of your mind and thinking about that as we go through this budget would be prudent. Councillor Rich? Oh, sorry, let's just take the CEO for a second.
Sorry, just wanted to clarify. Mr. Moat, you said is 98% correct. I just want to clarify. We're seventh, I think, ranking of the municipalities that participated. So it's not in the province, but over 100, representing 85% of the population. So pretty close.
Councillor Rich.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Sue. So I was just looking at the percentages, residential versus commercial income as tax revenue. Do you happen to know kind of where that sits? So I think I lost a slide, but it's we're getting 87% of our revenues coming from residential sources. Are you seeing that drop a little bit because we're getting more commercial intake in the area? Is that the kind of goal that we would like to have, be at about 90% residential and everything else come from commercial, or would we like to have more commercial in the area?
Thank you. Our commercial assessment increased by approximately $6.6 million this year, so that represented about $44,000. So there was some increase in commercial as well.
I guess my question is that I like to look at kind of our world with goals, right? So in a community like ours, I think that we want to bring in more economic development. I'm just trying to figure out what would be a really good percentage comparison. Like if you, for example, had 80% residential and 20% that came from commercial and industrial sources, would that compare to other municipalities as kind of an ideal marker? Do you know what I mean?
I wouldn't have that information.
CAO has a comment.
Yeah, thanks for the question, and it's an excellent observation. Certainly, Saugeen Shores is on the high side of 87%, 88% of that. Our goal is to reduce that in a perfect balance. If I could write this script, which we're hoping to through the budget, it would be significantly less. We'd like to see about 80% based on residential and about 20% on everything else. Residents pay taxes, but they consume services. Industrial, commercial pay more taxes and they consume less services. So it's better to have a balance of about 80-20. That's a general rule we use in economic development. So that's why you'll see we want to invest in the opportunity we've got of attracting more businesses to Saugeen Shores and hopefully manufacturing and commercial and all of those other things.
Oh, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Sue, I think heading into this process, at the end of the day, if we accept, I know we got a lot of things to discuss here today, but if we accepted the recommendation of our CAO and staff, be around 3%. We're heading into 3 plus. 1% tax increase equals about 145,000, correct? 150,000?
Yes, that's correct.
So if we at the end of the day did end up at 3% and the partnership funding announcement came back in a week or two or three, and hypothetically say that we round out a number of $150,000 reduction, I'm just guessing, that 3% then becomes 4.5%, obviously, correct? If we were to see a reduction, and so at the end of the day, if we were at 3%, only to find out in 2 weeks that we had a reduction in partnership funding, then I guess at that point, do we go back to the drawing board? Do we just ask staff to come back and find the savings? I just want to know at the end of the day, if we ended up at a certain number, partnership funding will have an impact potentially.
Yeah, and just Sue and I are tag teaming questions and answers, so you're going to see us looking at each other. Her legs aren't long enough to kick me and that type of thing. But to answer your question, Vice Deputy Mayor, absolutely, we would have the opportunity to come back to council and come up with other strategies. Excuse me. We do have some reserve funds if it was a temporary blip. I would just caution you that the 1% is on town taxes, and we're talking blended tax rates, so the numbers are a little bit different. But certainly that partnership agreement is on our radar, and we hope to have the information before final budget approval.
I think the thing is flexibility is got to be the word of the day. There's a few things we don't know. Bruce County's budget won't come until March. We don't know what the final MPF numbers are going to be, so we're going to need to be flexible going forward before we make any final decisions because we just don't know how much money we're going to have. Yep, sure you can.
And I'm sorry for jumping in. I just want to make sure that we can have a discussion on some of these things. In our heads, the legacy fund is a little bit of a cushion for us. If we have more room, we can contribute more. If we have less room, we can contribute a little bit less. We don't want to contribute less. We're working hard to make it bigger, but there is a little bit of swing space in there if required.
Okay, if there's nothing further then, we'll move on to the rest of Sue's presentation. Sue.
Thank you. Okay, let me just go back to... So the tally sheet that you have in your budget package is just a real quick snapshot of the change in each departmental area, and it reflects the tax levy required to fund those changes at this time. And you'll see further details as we go through each departmental sheet as to those numbers. Those numbers just reflect sort of the net tax levy that's required to fund those departments. Does anyone have any questions on the tally sheet? Just to reiterate, the additional requests are not included in these numbers. A staff additional requests are identified in the presentation through individual request sheets at the back after we go through each departmental budget. And as we've estimated previously in discussions, that it's estimated that approximately an additional $500,000 will be available to be transferred to the legacy reserved, which will bring the annual contribution to approximately $1.4 million. And I'm going to throw it back to David for the clerks and CAO office.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we're shifting gears here a little bit. Our plan now is each department head will do a short presentation. Most of them are 3 or 4 slides. I'm going to do one, then Sue's going to do hers, and then we'll open up the binders, and the mayor will lead us through each section, and you'll have the opportunity to ask specific questions, and then we'll go to the next department and go through the next department and go through the next department. Linda and I arm wrestled, and I lost, so I'm doing the presentation for clerks and CO. Apparently, clerks write a lot, so their muscles are big and strong. But I'm delighted to do this. Because I think we've got a really good story here. So in terms of clerks in the CAO's office, we've got 3 areas of responsibility generally. We help council and help you be successful, as our department heads do. But in terms of budget and finance, we've got the clerks section, clerks division, which is headed up by Linda, our clerk. You can see the areas of responsibility. This is familiar to you. We went through this in our council orientation. And then we've got the CAO's office, which has got 3 areas currently: doctor recruitment, strategic initiatives, and tourism. In 2018, some significant achievements in this area. First and foremost is we had a very successful municipal election. It was well planned for, well executed, especially in the trying circumstances that 40-some, I think, municipalities found themselves in Ontario. But I think we administratively, we hold our head high in how we prepared for and executed the election. Many thanks to Linda for doing that. Strategic initiatives are our award-winning team. You've been privy to many of the awards. If you walk by Laura's office and Jessica's office, you start to see that. We're starting to get more and more recognition. I may have told you the story. I was speaking to a lawyer in Kingston, and he said, I'm reading about all sorts of great things that are happening in Saugeen Shores. You may remember as well, we were profiled in the Toronto Sun last year as well. So lots of things happening. The Shore Report, which I know you all listen to, over 60, I dare I go out on a limb and say over 6,600 listens to that, and very successful. And the budget for that, overall budget, is less than $100. 15 companies have now landed. Don't need to go through each one of these, but some real significant achievements in 2018. And we're looking to council to support us as we take advantage of the opportunities that we've got. Saugeen Shores, we are in a very sweet spot in terms of economic growth. And going back to what Councillor Rich was asking, building our employment base in Saugeen Shores, building our commercial and industrial base, and we had our economic development plan, which was approved by council. It did call for additional horsepower, and you'll see that later in our presentation. So we want to continue with that. Technology is our friend in terms of public participation, and our community seems to be very responsive to electronic consultation and in person. With our recent cannabis survey, we had over 1,000 people respond to it. So we're excited about doing more public consultation in 2019. We're working very hard along with the mayor and some staff to secure the Nuclear Innovation Institute in Saugeen Shores in 2019. So we're hoping in Q1 we'll be able to sign that deal. And we have goals as well to develop a people plan. You've heard me say before, if the returning elected officials, we have an asset management plan, we have a transportation, we will have a transportation plan, we've got a recreation plan, we've got a trails plan, but we don't have a people plan. And people is our most important resource and a very important investment for us. So in 19, we will be developing a people plan. We've got talented HR staff supporting us, and we're going to be moving that. And one of our goals is to work with council and our community to have dialogue and solutions related to labor shortage and affordable housing. So those are some of our goals. We do have challenges, as all of our sections do, and ours, quite frankly, are enviable challenge. We do have increased service level expectations. People in our community are demanding more and expecting more and requesting more, and we need to rise to those challenges. We also, and this is a significant one that I was speaking with the deputy mayor on this recently, is there's lots of good ideas, but we have limited resources with many priorities. we hear good ideas all of the time, but there is a capacity. There's a resource capacity, both financial, both intellectual. We can only work on so many projects at a certain time. So it's as difficult it is to say no to some good ideas. I think that's going to be our one of our solutions going forward. However, it's not always saying a hard no. It's okay. Well, how do we make this someone else's priority? How do we limit our participation but still enable it to be successful? We need to remember we are a competitive marketplace for tourism and for economic development. We are in competition with other communities for businesses, for economic growth, for where tourists are going to sleep at night, where they're going to have their lunch, where a tournament is going to be. It's a competitive business, and we shouldn't forget that. And then finally, organizational change is a long-term investment. It's something that we've started assertively in 2018, and we're continuing in 2019. So that's my presentation. We're not going to take questions yet. Sue's going to do her presentation, although I could answer questions to those slides. But for the budget pages, if you just hold off for another minute, Sue's going to do hers, and then we'll open up the binder. If there's any questions to mine, no. Sue?
Okay, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of corporate services. The divisions and services that are under corporate services are finance, which includes our taxation, accounts payable, accounts receivable. Human resources started in January 2019, previously under the CAO, and information technology. So I've got a few of our 2018 achievements. We redesigned our intranet in 2018. We filled our vacancies, so now Director of Corporate Services was filled and the CFO Treasurer was filled. And we managed through that staff turnover, and now we're fully staffed. So to me, that was a big plus for my department, and I'd like to thank them because they did a lot of work this year for us. In seasonal hiring, we approximately hired 60 seasonal employees for the summer months, which is, when you have one person in HR, that creates a lot of work in a short amount of time. And we also started a review of our total compensation program, and recommendations have been reviewed and discussed with senior management in 2018. In 2019, our goals are to provide regular financial updates to Council, to provide a long-range financial plan, including updating a reserve strategy. We're going to update the purchasing policy, implement a new payroll system. We're going to standardize our job descriptions and clean up our employee files, and implement, I've got that in there twice, payroll and HR, human resource information system. So we are hoping that when we look for a new system, it includes the HR time attendance piece as well as just processing payroll. We want to review our benefit plans, and we're going to introduce a concept of total compensation philosophy and clarity on policy programs related to compensation. We're going to implement an internal job evaluation committee, and we're going to look at lean processing our hiring and employee changes to ensure accuracy and timeliness of information. And we also have challenges. We have aging technology and increased demand on our IT staff, changing employment legislation. That's always a big challenge for us, especially in 2018. There were some changes that were implemented and then withdrawn through our provincial government. And sort of just to reiterate what David said, it's balancing the day-to-day with our long-term goals. So as we grow, some of the day-to-day operations create more work. So it's finding that balance between the two. So anyways, that takes us back into the budget package.
Sure, thank you, Sue. Are there any questions at this point with regard to what Sue has just said? No? Yep, Vice Deputy Mayor.
Sue, I agree with you on the aging technology, and I also agree with your increased demands on our IT department of one. We got a new police department coming on board next fall, and that's going to create more demands on our IT department of one. And I'm just wondering, before we leave your department, through you or through our CAO, has management had any discussion at all around the need to increase staffing in the IT department of one, which I believe is understaffed? And you mentioned what aging technology, increased demands. I see nowhere in this package about IT.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Deputy Mayor. So thanks for the question. It is something that we address corporately. So each year, and as we go through the year, we look at all of our pinch points, and we also look at our risk points. So there's two components. There's one about workload and increasing workload and capacity, and then there's the aspect of risk. If somebody might not be busy, but if they left, it would be a problem for us. And I'm not suggesting that Husker's not busy, but in IT, we've got both of those things. It's a workload, we're reaching capacity workload, and it is a risk area for us as well. Oscar does. Lots of our IT has that intellectual knowledge that isn't transferable. We have some other positions like that. One of the things in Sue's previous slide, she talked a lot about human resources. We are ramping up our human resources game 100 times over. One of the requests that we've got in here is our previous HR person was taxed to the limit by doing day-to-day stuff, filling out the forms, hiring the 60 summer staff, making sure people got their benefit stuff, and didn't have the time to address these other things you're referencing. So succession planning, risk planning, workload planning, and with the requests that we've got, our plan is in 2019. That people plan I referenced earlier will help solve many of those things.
I agree. I see that area, that department, as an area of what we call risk. I think we ought to be considering. It's a little surprising again there was something additional in here. In light of the fact we got a new building coming on board, and I know how much time IT, at least, I have a pretty good idea how many times our IT person is running across to the police department. I'm not trying to just pick on that department, but I know there's a lot of time spent there. So I'm glad it's on the radar that it would be at least looked at. I know we're looking at 2 or 3 new staff staff additions in this package today. I think 2, maybe 3. And so I'm just surprised that IT wasn't there. So, but thanks for your explanation.
Anything further on those slides? I just make the comment, Sue, that I'm very pleased in the 2019 goals, the very first goal, regular financial updates to council. I think that, getting a good quarterly update on actuals against the budget is, something that's pretty commonly done in a lot of other organizations that I've been part of, and it would be really great to see that now that we have some of the horsepower inside your department to do that work. It's going to be really great to see. So I'm glad to see that as a 2019 goal. So there's nothing further then on that. So we'll start working our way then through the sheets, pardon me, under Corporate Services, Revenue, Governance, and Administration. And I'm just going to work through those A through M one at a time. And if there are questions from members on those, we'll take them as we go. So the first one, item A, is tax revenue. And I'll ask if any member has any questions on the tax revenue sheets. Pull this out of here so I can do both at the same time. Don't see any questions on tax revenue. If there anything really pressing happens to pop into your head as we go forward, we can double back. So we'll just go right on to the council service area. Are there any questions from anyone on the council service area? The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, this is to our CEO. David, is this the time where we can talk about the technological pay that goes to the council? Is this where we talk about this now, or is that at a later date?
If you have a question on it, you can ask it now.
Well, I just wanted, like, the $12.50 that is being allocated to each council member is that over the 4 years? Looking at it, that works down to only $26, whereas where you're looking at phone rates and computer usage for the council. I know that everybody pretty much lives on their phones to getting their answers and questions and messages out and looking at stuff, and then the time they use on their computer at home. I was wondering if we'd be able to bump that up, double that to $2,500. That would make it about $50 a month for the 4-year term.
So I can answer that. Certainly, we have just implemented what was recommended in the report. But your questions today, we can take that back, and when we come back with the final report, so if that's something you'd like us to consider, we're happy to do that. Yeah. And we can put together a response to that, Deputy Mayor, and report back to that as part of the final budget.
Okay, so thank you. I'd like to see that bumped up to $2,500.
Okay, are there any other comments on the council service area? Yeah, why don't we go to Councillor Smith?
Line item related to committee expenses, previously unrecorded in 2018 and beyond. Can you just explain that item, please?
So previously, in 2018, committee expenses were sort of in different budget departments. So we've just reallocated into council because I know they're sort of reviewing the committees of council and have been discussing. So we thought until there was further decisions, we would put the budget allocation into this department and then go from there.
Vice Deputy Mayor?
Just to follow up on Deputy Mayor, I do agree, Deputy Mayor, with your comment, and I think it's a number that's too low. My question is, throughout the process today, when these kinds of requests come up, do we need a show of hands at all, or are we just going to take one comment and assume that that's agreed to by all of council? How are we, just wondering, Mr. Mayor, how are we going to handle each of these requests as we go along?
No, we won't assume that they're agreed to. What's happened is Deputy Mayor has raised it. CAO has agreed to bring it back to us at a future date, and what will happen is it will likely be approached the same way that these additional requests in today's package are being approached. They'll be added in at a later date, and we'll then have an opportunity to vote up and down on which of them we want to add and which not. Best to handle them after we've seen the whole thing and how much of a budget financial impact each one of those is going to have.
I understand it when I make it fine, but I just was a show of hands. You wanted even to go past this stage of what our Deputy Mayor was talking about. That was my referring to that. I wasn't referring to making the recommendation and approving because we got a lot of things to discuss. But
looks like the CAO has a comment, David.
Yeah, if I can ask for council's tolerance, is if there's things that are fairly routine and not of significant staff work, we'll take that, we'll report back. So in this particular case, whether it comes back on final budget day or comes back before budget day, so you can make a decision based on the facts. If it's something significant, then I would ask the mayor get direction from council. If you're looking for us to do something big, we would like all of council to agree.
Is there anything further than on the council service area? Don't see anything, so why don't we move on to item C, the election. Any questions on the election? Councillor Rich.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm just having a look at it. It looks as though we budgeted for $62,000 and we only spent $37,000. Is that kind of how it went? Is that the transition over to electronic voting? Oh, maybe to you, Linda.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. We actually have not received our final invoice from the supplier yet. So this was a year-to-date as of October 31st. So this is not our final amount.
Right, so then that actually leads me to the question, do you foresee this being enough, $15,000 a year to put aside for election expenses, or do you think it'll be more or less expensive to run in their current method?
No, we are recommending the $15,500 is an accurate amount.
Any other questions on the election? Councillor Schreier.
Just a question, I guess, through you to Linda. Do we know what other municipalities are doing? Are there any payments that we would be withholding and not paying the total invoice because of some of the issues that we had during the election? Thank you.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we are withholding the final payment until we've discussed reduction. At this point in time, there's been an offer of a 20% reduction on the final payment. And that offer is coming from the company as compensation or a recognition of the glitch that did happen.
Yep, Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering about if it's possible to discuss at a later date some kind of evaluation, public survey, feedback on the election and how it went, and whether that would be included in this budget. I think, there, as well as our staff did, I think there were some challenges, and the approximate 10% reduction in participation. I'm wondering about whether we should be including money for that.
You have made that request before, so I have heard it, so I do apologize that the survey has not gone out. I do not think there's a financial implication to your budget to undertake the survey.
Anything further? Anything more on that one? So then we'll move on then to the corporate service area. Any questions or comments? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, through you to David. David, I see reduction in Westero Power dividend income, 190,000 reduced by 50,000 in this year's budget to 140, which is a significant drop. Could you just share with Council your thoughts around where you believe we're heading with our dividend income in 2019 and onward? I'm going 19. We're budgeting 140, but what's the long-term, strategy here?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, and through the mayor to you and the rest of council is I had included the line. This trend is expected to reverse going forward. West Ontario has made some significant capital investments in capital, and their capital is very costly. The mayor, then the deputy mayor, attended the AGM at West Ontario, and certainly the chair of West Ontario, the chair of the board, and the CEO did speak about the need to make sure that our investment and the dividend is on the uptake and back to where it was. Certainly our expectations with them are clear, and I have every expectation that you'll see that trend go back up.
I'll add to that for those who don't know, our representative on West Ontario Power is our CAO, and he has done some excellent work representing us in terms of presenting those very facts and ensuring that it is a priority of the board at West Ontario to see these dividends rise and to see our return on investment go up. So I think you can rest assured that we are well represented there, and that message is making its way to the highest levels at West Ontario Power. Are there any further comments on the corporate service area? Councillor Schreier.
Just one question through you. In 2017, under corporate donations, sorry, I should have started there, 61,000 and then nothing or I guess 1,300 in 2018 and a budget of 550. I guess what falls under that donations budget line?
Sorry, I believe it was a donation to the hospital in previous years.
Yolanda, that was before my time. So.
Thank you.
Vice Deputy Mayor.
Just had one follow-up in regards to the legacy fund. I believe is included on the last line, 6115-9370, page 13. Are we talking legacy fund a little bit later on in the budget discussions, or is this a good time to talk about legacy fund?
Yeah, certainly. I think it may be best when we get to the. There is a specific sheet on
Okay.
the legacy fund,
Okay.
so if you want to hold your thought to then, if that's appropriate. Okay, thank you.
Anything further on the corporate service area? Seeing nothing, then we'll move on to E, administration. Questions or comments with regard to that service area? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was under the Chantry Island part-time wages of $8,000, and in 2018 it was 10,000, almost 11,000. Was that covering? Do we handle the student workers?
So, excuse me, sorry to interrupt there. We budget, we pay for the Chantry Island student and they reimburse us. So I just sort of wanted to get, we typically historically have not put numbers in those budget lines and they net against each other. So I was just sort of looking at historical, just so we could put numbers in there to twig if we haven't billed properly or something in our budget. So.
Anything further? Don't see anything, so why don't we move on then to strategic initiatives. Any questions from any members in the strategic initiatives service area? Nothing? Vice Deputy Mayor?
So this is the budget where it includes an economic development, corporate communication, organizational, right? Is this the budget where we're including the new position?
Discuss that at the end as part of the, so it's really a question for
Good.
But
the end of the meeting.
we will answer your yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Councillor Smith.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, line item related to communications. There's a significant overspend in 2018 year to date. Are we expecting any more through the last quarter? And there's a significantly lower budget estimated for 2019.
The manager of strategic initiatives.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so what you're seeing on the 2018 year to date, there's actually a bit of reallocation. That's some website spending. So the 2018 budget of $32,000 includes the content refresh and some of the refresh of our website, which will be going live mid-February. So the overspend is on that, but will be allocated properly. So you will see that number change a little bit for the end figures. And so moving that to the $20,000 for the 2019 projected budget, what that doesn't include, again, is that website project. So that's why we are able to reallocate some of that funding. And you will see that difference from that 30 to that 20 is reallocated under organizational effectiveness / corporate training.
Thank you. Anything, any further questions on the strategic initiative service area? Yeah, Councillor Carr.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess the question here, when I'm looking at our actual numbers, I guess my question would be is why has that jumped so high? Is that just reallocating how they're being paid? Like, is that jump from somebody else's budget to its own here now then? So that does not represent the request that's at the end for the new position. Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
No, it does not.
Okay, anything further? Don't see anything, so why don't we move along then to information technology. Questions on the information technology line, or pardon me, service area. I have a question in that area. I was wondering, well, a couple of things, I guess. Do we have, what efforts, what steps is the administration taking at this point around cybersecurity for the corporation? I mean, we've heard a lot of instances in the last number of months about municipal governments facing cybersecurity threats, and certainly some action is warranted, I think. And I wonder also if the administration has looked at cyber insurance coverage. I know the County of Bruce has recently gotten insurance coverage to protect itself against any number of cyber attacks. And I just wonder, is that something that we're currently covered for in our insurance package, or something that we're looking at? So that question and the broader question about what we're doing. Sue?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I actually just recently got some quotes from our insurance broker for that type of insurance. So Dan and I will be looking at that when he returns from his vacation to just sort of determine. We've asked for multiple different quotes based on different levels and figuring out exactly what that insurance coverage covers, and then we'll bring it back because it is an additional cost for that insurance.
Yes. Are there other measures or other steps that we're taking at this point around cybersecurity?
Unfortunately, I don't believe Oscar is in the room.
So I have one, our Oscar, he's all of ours. Oscar has set up a very aggressive, I'm not sure how to articulate it, but all staff are required to go through a training program, an online training program, and then they actually send us bait, email bait, so phishing emails and scam emails and that type of stuff. So our inbox once or twice a week, you get something that looks it, and we've been trained on how to discern whether it's accurate or not. And if we click on it, he gets a report, and that goes back into, and he comes back to us and increases our training in that. So it is a live happening, and I've never clicked on it except once. But it creates awareness, because most of these things are coming in, these viruses come in when staff inadvertently respond to somebody or do some kind of email. So that is something that we started in 2018. It's very effective. I can tell you personally, every email I look at now from a different perspective.
Okay, thanks. I would just conclude by saying that I'm sure the council would agree with me that we'd be very interested in resourcing whatever is necessary to maximize our cybersecurity, and if the administration is looking at other things we can do to improve that, and that they have a financial impact, to certainly encourage the administration to bring them forward. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the CEO. Is that something we could get a little training for council as well? I know some of us are computer literate. We have different degrees of computer literacy, and I think that would be something good, because we get the abundant amount of emails coming in, just help us discern what's good and what's not.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't see any reason why not, barring something else. We'll facilitate that.
Schreider.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is a budget line for admin allocation or interdepartment transfer, and some of the separate budget lines have IT allocation. So would that include then staff wages? So would it be Oscar's wages? Would it be IT equipment? So is each department, i.e. engineering or police services, getting invoiced or charged essentially for Oscar's time and also the equipment that they use in the services?
Yes, some of his time is allocated to different departments, not all departments. Majority of the departments are either more of the self-funded, water, sewer, and it does go across a few of them.
Okay, but not all departments.
Not every department, no.
IT allocated.
No.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When Oscar, our IT man, is on vacation, how do we cover ourselves in case there's a breakdown?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have a company out of Owen Sound that we use, and then when he's off, I use them if there's any issues. Infinity Solutions is the name.
The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, just a question again about police services, perhaps our CEO or police chief. I'm not sure who would like to answer, but when the new police building is being, fitted with all our modern technology, that's a significant task for one person again, our department of one. What is the plan for the installation of our entire computer system? Is it Oscar we contracting out into this contract service, or how's that going to be handled?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, the chief and I meet every other week generally with the project team, and the project team fluctuates on members. When we talk about certain things, we invite other staff members to participate. So things like IT, things like furniture, we're now starting that work on it. In terms of the building, all of that is done contractually. In terms of wiring and that, our move, we're going to have that contractually put out. Oscar has done an analysis of what IT equipment we can take over and what ones we need to buy new. We haven't yet got to the level of detail of is he going to plug the computer in or whether we'll contract that out. Certainly we'll work with Oscar and his director to make sure that his workload is managed. I would expect that we would contract that out. Owen Sound, we do get some support from them as well, because some of the police computer systems are very, very close and restricted.
Anything further on information technology? Seeing nothing, let's move on then to animal control. Any questions with regard to the animal control service area? Yes, Councillor Carr.
Through you again, Mr. Mayor, I'm just curious as to when I see the line there for the bylaw enforcement, is that a contract fee that we're paying out each year regardless of whether or not we use them, or is that something that's a per-use payment?
So that is a contract for our service. So they provide a patrol service on a monthly basis. You get additional service in the summer months. In addition to their monthly patrols, they also respond to call-outs, so there's a fee for a call-out for service as well. So dog is running at large, it gets impounded. The animal control comes and impounds it into the pet hospital. So there's two components of the contract.
So from the way I understand that, then we do pay that contract fee, and then over and above that, each time he responds to a call or they respond to a call, that's over and above that.
It's within the contract, and it's within the budget allocation. But yes, so if it's $40 for a call out, the dog gets impounded, for example, the dog owner then has to reclaim the fee. The dog owner then pays the animal control contract fee. So we actually recover the expense of the animal control when the dog or cat is reclaimed by the owner.
Any further questions on animal control? I was just wondering, to the clerk maybe, do we have an idea, like the 2017 actual at 25,297 was about $3,000 lower than what we approved as a budget for income in 2018. I wonder, in 2018, do you think we'll be closer to hitting those actuals in terms of our income on licenses and fines? Do we know where we're trending at this point?
For 2018, we will not meet our target for the revenue. In 2019, it is our anticipation that we actively advertise and collect additional dog and cat tags. So the process right now is that those that have a dog or a cat registered with the municipality, they will receive their bill their invoice for 2019, kind of at the end of January, 1st of February. So they're already on our register. It's a permanent dog tag. They pay an annual invoice. So the next step in the process is to actively go out and increase our database of those who have dogs and cats in the municipality.
What we're talking about is a more aggressive marketing campaign to get people to buy these tags.
That is correct.
Excellent. Nothing further on animal control, then we'll move on to municipal heritage. Any questions or comments with regard to the municipal heritage service area? I don't see anybody. So why don't we move then on to promotion? Are there any questions with regard to the promotion service area? Yeah, so there's an additional request for funding from the chamber, but this just includes a hold the line budget, and the additional 4%
Yes,
comes
that's
later.
correct,
Okay. All right. If there's nothing on promotions, then sorry, Councillor Smith. Yep, go ahead.
So the line items related to advertising are particularly low year-to-date 2018. Is there anything we're doing to actually spend that money in 2018? Is there anything we're foreseeing? Historically, they're low as well. We're budgeting 5,000. 2017 spent under 9.
I can't speak to that directly without doing a little bit more further analysis. I suspect that might be an area then we look at to make sure we haven't reallocated some expenses into the wrong line for next year.
I can just comment. So of all of our cost centers, this is the one, because I looked around, Linda had her head down, Sue had her head down, we all had our head down. This is the cost center that, of all of them, this is the only one that really doesn't have a champion on. We use this a little bit when council requests come in or certain things come in throughout the year. It gives us a little bit of wiggle room there. So that's why there's not a ready answer to it. Sometimes we do get requests from service group and council is supports it, and that's how.
Deputy Mayor?
So typically, Joanne Robbins would be here, and I'm just wondering why Chamber's not represented. They should be presenting their budget, I think, but they could answer that question very easily. But were they invited? I take it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. This is not the Chamber's budget. This is just our own corporate budget. So the Chamber's budget comes later on in the agenda, and the staff from the Chamber will be here between 2 and 4:30 this afternoon.
Okay, I'm misunderstanding it then. Contract service to Chamber for tourism, $158,000?
Yes.
So I'm confused, sorry.
Okay. So the Chamber actually has an additional request for service on it. So you are correct. It comes up in this line item, but their additional request is later on in the agenda. So I've scheduled the staff to come in the afternoon to speak to the Chamber budget.
So this is the Chamber tourism budget then?
I think that the chamber and tourism budget is in here as a top line number, just your all-in number. But what the long and short of it is, we're going to hear from the chamber later. If you have questions with regard to the chamber budget, they're going to be here. And I guess my question is just at the risk of jumping ahead just in a small way. Is it the intention then of the administration that this, since there is no champion, quote unquote, for promotions, that this economic development officer that you're suggesting that this would become part of that responsibility? No.
No, I don't have a good recommendation for you. It is something that it's on our list to resolve, and it's number 75 on our list, so we'll get there.
Okay, very good. Okay, if there's nothing further then on promotions, then we'll move on to the Southampton Medical Facility. Questions or comments with regard to that service area?
May I just make one comment? If there are any questions on the year-to-date, I would suspect the revenue for that time period hadn't been probably entered at the time I downloaded the information. As I can tell that the revenue is too low, so I know there's a timing issue there from when the revenue has been recorded.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Yeah, Councilor Rich.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. I'm not sure if it exactly relates to budget. I guess I'm looking at both medical facilities sort of collectively and looking at the number of physicians we need to bring in. Do we feel like we're maximizing use of that space of the Southampton Medical Facility now, or where are they? I'm just trying to get a read of where everybody is to move in new doctors, whether we're getting maximum revenue out of that place or not.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a good question. The Southampton, the physicians there, and I would agree with them, that the upper floor is fully utilized. It's full. It's the design of it is a shared space. It's not a real attractive space in way that doctors currently work, and nurse practitioners. We do have one there. It is full. The basement of the building, the lower level, is completely underutilized. We have shown it as part of our economic development strategy to a number of companies. There's a series of offices there. I've worked with the doctors here to try and incent them to help us rent that space. So it is underutilized. It's not appropriate for a doctor. There's no elevator to the lower level, so it is restrictive. But it is space that sitting there empty.
Vice Deputy Mayor.
Just in terms of the debt repayment, through you to Sue. Sue, taking away the debt repayment 109, this is almost a break-even budget, save except maybe $5,000. How many years left on the debt repayment schedule for
I believe that actual mortgage actually renews it in November of 2000, so I believe it was a 5. The term of that particular mortgage is, when I looked back at the long-term debt, was November 2019 per our financial statements last year. So we will be renewing that. I'm not sure. I hadn't had a chance to look at couldn't find the long-term debt. Yeah.
Okay. Just curious where we're at.
Yeah, Councillor Schreier.
Just a question through you. The Southampton wage line, Southampton Medical Building wage line, $230,000. What positions come out of that the municipality pays? In Port Elgin, there's only, $5,000. So what is the difference in the way that those are managed or operated, where we are carrying the load for the wages?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So there's two different models in play here. In Southampton, we act as quite frankly, as the bank and as the accounts payable and payroll for the group. So most of these costs are gone out. We're paying on their behalf, and then they pay us a portion of that back. That's why you see the difference. We're doing that. They send us invoices. We pay them, and then we divvy it up and invoice them. So those costs would be for their administration staff, the office administrator, any of their clerical staff, that type of thing. The model in Port Elgin at the Dr. Earl is different, where they manage their own business. Certainly we would like to we've been working, Mayor Smith and I had meetings with the doctors in Southampton, try and shift them to the model Dr. Earl. It's much cleaner, and it's where we'd like to go in future, where we are going in future, quite frankly.
Further comments with regard to the Southampton medical facility? Okay, then let's move on then to the Port Elgin Dr. Earl medical facility. Are there questions or comments with regard to that service area? Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one note that when I was going through this yesterday, I said, why do we have a line for taxes on that? If it's a municipally owned building, do we actually pay taxes on that building? Taxes, utilities, and insurance?
I don't want to give you an answer I don't have the full information for, so I can get back to you on that.
Get an answer back. I think we can just sort of take that as rote for a lot of these questions where we don't have an immediate answer. The administration will respond to all these questions once they have the information. Well, if we do, it's in and out. Any other questions or comments with regard to Port Elgin, the Port Elgin Medical Building? Nope. Okay. Then let's move on then to the last one in corporate services, doctor recruitment. Questions or comments with regard to doctor recruitment service area? Oh, sorry, Councillor Mayette.
Thank you once again, Mr. Mayor. So the contract expenses of $147,000, that's our portion of the money that we spend for the full-time recruiter? But my understanding was that position is funded by 3 sources, through Kincardine, Bruce Power, and us. Is that just our portion, so the others pay the same?
I can speak to that. This is a combination. There's a couple of things here. One is we are a 1/3 contributor to the physician recruitment program, and that cost is about $30,000 a year, 35, somewhere in that neighborhood. The rest of these expenses are for incentives for doctors. So when we have a new doctor come to town, a council approves an incentive package for them, and that's what these expenses are. They go up and down depending on how many new doctors we've recruited to town. So this has both of those things in it.
There's a relatively significant tax levy increase or on this service area this year due to the fact that we've used up the doctor recruitment reserve, $40,000 increase, and that increase is, by the looks of it, entirely related to the loss of that reserve. So, is there any further questions or comments? Don't see any, so why don't we break for 10 minutes till hour, and then we'll carry on with Fire and Protective Services. Okay, let's call this meeting back to order, and we're moving on then to item 5 in the agenda, which is Fire, Protective Services, Emergency Preparedness, Health and Safety, Building Services, and Bylaw Enforcement. Just a couple of items there, and we'll turn it over to the Director of Protective Services, Phil Eagleson, to present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following the same format, I will go through some brief summary slides, and then we'll get right into the lines of the budget. As Mr. Mayor said, Protective Services is Fire and Rescue Services, Corporate Health and Safety, Community Emergency Preparedness, Nuclear Emergency Preparedness, Building Services, Bylaw Enforcement, and Corporate Training. In 2018, we had a busy year. We brought on board a new training officer, as well as a new building inspector to help with the workload there. We introduced a firefighter wellness program, very comprehensive, and started that program in 2018. We did a major revamp of our community emergency plan. It hadn't been fully revised for over 10 years, and we broke it down and built it up, and it was approved by council in the last quarter of 2018. We also, while we were doing that, we worked with the provincial committees to revise our nuclear emergency plan, and that's still pending approval with the province at this time. In 2019, we hope to continue the success of the firefighter wellness program and find things that work and change the things that don't, to invest as heavily as we can in our firefighters' health. We also will bring on new recruit firefighters in 2019, and we'll have some challenges to meet the NFPA standards and train that large group of new firefighters. In the building department, our number one and our most major goal is to implement a paperless permitting software system. Very customer service based and user friendly to the builders, where they can track their permits and bring us ahead. Our software there is very outdated, and that will be coming as a capital request later. Challenges: increased call volume to fire, specifically residential non-emergency alarms. The firefighters are responding to a lot of CO calls, non-symptoms, alarm calls in homes that are monitored, and just the nuisance calls are our highest increased call volume, and that's a trend we're going to continue to see for the next several years. In bylaw is working very well right now. We have a very small period of the year in June, July, August, where something happens to our population here, and when that happens, we see some increased demands on bylaw for that short period of the summer months. But then something happens in the fall, and we are again able to maintain a good bylaw enforcement program. And then lastly, emergency planning continues to be a challenge of ours, both emergency community-based and nuclear emergency planning. But we do what we can to meet the requirements. My last slide I just included to give council a quick overview of the building department and what we've seen there. And the takeaway from this slide is the last 5 years we've seen really good, solid growth. We've doubled our building activity in Saugeen Shores, and it's not outrageous, crazy growth. It's exactly what we would want: a moderate, good increase year to year, and we're projecting over $100 million next year.
Thank you for that. Is there any questions before we move into the sheets on anything that Phil has just presented? Councilor Rich.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. First off, I'd like to commend you on doing the wellness program. I think that's very important. It makes a huge difference. I think any progressive department has a wellness program. Good job getting it going. I have a question about training. So you said you're going through recruitment. is the training line item, which I think is $10,000, does that take in the additional resources that are required for training? And as also part of that, I think there's $3,900 that from last year, from a budgeted $10,000. Is that something that's going to come up over the last little bit, or was that reflective of changes by bringing on a training officer? Or can you just explain those line items for me?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we believe that the 10,000 is sufficient for 2019. Be it that there will be some cost efficiencies with our training officer. We'll be able to deliver a lot more in-house than we did to send people away for the similar training sessions. Be able to host some NFPA-based trainings and then invite neighbors and recover some costs there. So what we believe 10,000 is a bit of a shot for the first year having a full-time training officer, but we think it's sufficient. We have removed some allocation of funds there. As you can see, we used some previous training dollars to fund the full-time training officer, and that's the $68,000 in line 1,800. But the full value of the training officer is now reflected in this year's budget.
We'll take Councillor Mayette, then come to Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. A lot of those calls are driven through alarm systems, so technology monitored technology, all good things. However, sometimes they call us before we're needed, and they're activations that are not real activations or perceived emergencies. So yes, we do our bylaw, the fees and charges bylaw allows us to make those recoveries. We respond initially to that address, and often the homeowner might not even be aware that there's been a call come to us, and they get one call free each calendar year. So we encourage alarm systems, we encourage monitored alarm systems, and if we get there and it's caused an alarm issue, we warn them and tell them they have to get their system fixed. And most of the time, they're very good to do that. If they're negligent in that, then they do get a bill for every subsequent call.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Phil, I wanted to go back to your point about the increased bylaw demands, enforcement demands in the summertime. And I'm wondering if you have some strategies that you're thinking of, just in general, of how we might address those demands this summer and ongoing.
Perfect. Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. The period of high demand is so small, and increasing the bylaw officer to full-time has allowed us to meet a lot of the requirements. We have some strategy around 2019 and some possible funding available for it, for a summer student or some additional horsepower in those weeks. We actually trialed it during Pumpkin Fest weekend this year, and the bylaw officer was accompanied by another person just for the weekend, and it was successful. So we look to this summer to monitor our requests for service, and if they warrant it, find somebody that will help out.
Councillor Schreider, and then the Deputy Mayor.
Through you, just to follow up then with the corporate training officer that was hired, which I think is a great thing. I'm so glad to see this position. Is that then available to other departments, so we're doing it across the town through other departments as well, and then would we see a reduction in some of our other budget line items for training budgets in other departments? Thank you.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, that is our goal. They're not all reflective in the first year. It takes that person some time to get the certifications behind them to be able to deliver the courses. So over the next couple of years, you're going to see the individual line training items maybe pulled back as we find those efficiencies. And to answer your first question, yes, it's all departments across the municipality. I believe he's working with the police in the next couple of weeks on a first aid course, and any training program or course that's multi-department is going to be championed by the training officer to find those efficiencies.
The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our fire chief. How many people did you have apply for the new positions, and how many are you looking at hiring?
The exact number of what we're hiring is a little uncertain at this time. We're looking at some retirements, and we know it's in the range of 12 to 14 is what we're bringing on, and we had over 70 apply.
That's great. So then you're looking at through attrition just replacement, because looking at your budget, you're staying the same as last year, and with these new firefighters, would your budget not need to be a little higher?
Yes, our wages will, through you, Mr. Mayor, our wages will be higher in 2019. We know that. We recognize that with a group of fresh new firefighters come on that are very training needed, and we'll have more hours spent with them. We will have additional, however, we have our wage stabilization reserve, and we're not afraid to go over a little bit on wages. I'll remind all of council the volunteer fire wages is money very well spent. And
Councillor Smith.
My question is related to operational equipment replacement. Do you have a minor fixed asset plan of any sort of an asset management forecast of these types of expenses?
Yes, we do. We include it with the corporate asset management plan.
I just wanted to make a comment about the one of the 2019 goals, in the building department, to implement updated paperless permitting software, which is going to be a great move and a real progressive thing to do. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that the building department, our building department, is really playing a leadership role across the region, or at least Bruce County, in doing that, undertaking that effort, and under the leadership of our chief building official, really bringing together building officials from across the county to advance that. And so, I mean, it's an exciting thing for our own department, but it's an exciting thing for Saugeen Shores taking a leadership role, as it should. I just wanted to highlight that. So, if there's nothing further on the slide presentation, then why don't we move on then to the individual sheets, and just give me a second here to organize myself. Yeah, so the first item then is fire. And does anyone have any questions or comments with regard to the fire service area? Good? Everybody good? Okay, then we'll move on then to health and safety. Any questions with regard to the health and safety service area?
Mr. Mayor, if I could, one comment I would make to our health and safety program is the success we realized in 2018. Very few injuries and very few lost time claims to our employees. So it is working. Sometimes you can't clearly identify the value in a program. However, when we have that few people off and our WSIB rates are low, we see some value for it.
You bet. Very good. There's nothing then on health and safety. And how about emergency preparedness in that service area? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor. Through you to Phil. Phil, just wondering, the emergency operations reserve, I see that 1680 would be transferred into reserve this year, and going back to 2017, I don't know why. I mean, perhaps when that is when that transfer from Bruce Power first started. I'm not sure, but there was 37,000 transferred over, a lot less this year. The money spent on material supplies and salaries and benefits. Can you just provide a quick breakdown where those dollars are spent, and do you anticipate, this year that full 56, 57, 58,000 will be spent on emergency preparedness? What does it represent? Who's involved with that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Vice Deputy Mayor. Yes, no, we do not propose that the budget be fully spent this year, and it's funded by a grant through Bruce Power for our obligations that are legislated by the province under the Provincial Nuclear Emergency Response Plan. As the host municipality to the nuclear plant, Kincardin's the designate, and we're the host. We have obligations, so Kincardin contributes, Bruce Power contributes and pays our program fully. And it covers our community emergency planning as well as our nuclear emergency planning. So we have a lot of lines that don't get fully utilized every year, but we can't allocate that money to other areas. It needs to stay in the emergency planning. So when we have a surplus every year, we transfer it to the emergency operations reserve, and we've been building that for a number of years since this grant started. We're projecting the budget at the end of the year to be around $200,000 in that reserve. Certainly not enough to cover us for a major emergency, but a good cushion there when needed. And we occasionally fund some projects out of that reserve when needed.
So Phil, even though you're showing salaries and benefits 22.4 and material and supplies 35.9, you're saying that even though you're budgeting for it, and only 1682 reserve, in all likelihood, is not going to be spent.
In all likelihood, it will not be spent.
But it's just going back into reserve, which is a good thing. Phil, the salaries and benefits, who is it? When you say salaries and benefits, who is it? Do you hire? What does it represent? Who is it?
We often do hire when we have a project. We'll bring in an expert for that project. So to help us through the nuclear emergency plan, we needed some expertise in that field, and we pay them from that area. Several years ago, we actually had a part-time CMC approved and worked with the town, and since then we've just contracted on a basis.
And Phil, the 40,000, 35,920 in material supplies, what kinds of things do you spend it on then?
Whenever needed, our emergency operations center, which is this room and the former council chambers at the Saugeen Public Works shop, is our alternate. And when we need technology or renovations or advancements in those areas, we use that.
Good, thanks, Phil.
Anything further on emergency preparedness? Don't see anything, so why don't we move on to building services? Are there any questions or comments with regard to the building service area? Vice Deputy Mayor.
Phil, did you mention in one of your slides that our building values have gone from like 30 million 6-7 years ago to 100 million? Is that what you said in one of your slides? Did I read that correct?
I'm sorry, none of us can probably see the numbers, but in the last 5 years, the permit value has more than doubled.
Great. Let's see. With the yearly value, what would 2018 be, for example, for 1 year value of our building permits?
We're projecting almost $100,000 $100 million in 2018. We're very close to, I think, 97
incredible
$1 million. We're really, really close.
So thanks for that question, and Phil, thanks for the response. That is something that the building department will be doing a presentation to council with the exact numbers. We wanted to make it a little bit of an unveiling, so just kind of erase what you heard. And we want it to be communicated a little bit differently than a sideline into a budget meeting.
Strike from the record, Mr. Mayor.
Everybody watching at home, please forget that but it's important to be clear, and it's something that worth highlighting. The town of Saugeen Shores has always had a very lean building department, given the amount of volume that it's dealt with, and today that remains just as true as ever. To do $100 million, or probably by the time everything comes through, more than $100 million in building permits in a year, based on the size of staff that we have and the size of organization we're operating with, is really outstanding. I mean, that's an extremely efficient department, and certainly deserves recognition for that. Are there further comments with regard to the building department service area? I don't see any. So why don't we go then to the last one, Item E, bylaw enforcement. Questions or comments to bylaw enforcement? I will just make the comment that we have had the discussion. It was raised in Phil's presentation about the summer spike in bylaw enforcement needs, and this is something shouldn't come as a surprise, as pointed out year over year. With this particular item, we're spending now $100,000 a year on bylaw enforcement. You must add that to the $3.75 million a year we're spending on police. So we nearly have $4 million in, our largest wage expense in the entire municipality is law enforcement. Surely we can handle spikes in the laws that we need to enforce with the policing resources that we have at hand. I really am fundamentally opposed, frankly, to seeing continued increases in bylaw enforcement expenditures, given the ongoing increases to policing expenditures we're going to face. Facility expenses, increasing wages. We're nearly $4 million today. It's just going to escalate so significantly without us doing anything just to maintain the status quo. So I think that the administration should pay very close attention to that. And whenever you're talking bylaw enforcement, talk law enforcement, and recognize that the taxpayers' investment in that area is significant. Is there anything else on law enforcement? Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regards to the bylaw enforcement, I see a line for $9,000. Those are the fines that we collect. Is there a discrepancy between fines that are levied and fines that we collect? I can imagine, in the summertime, you might have a tourist here who walks his dog on the beach and gets fined, for instance. Doesn't mean they're going to pay that fine because they don't live here, they don't have a property here, you can't levy their taxes, kind of thing. Is there a delta between what we levy and what we actually collect?
I'm unaware of what that delta would be. I'm sure there are unpaid fines, but I'll have to get back to you on that.
Anything further? We're on bylaw enforcement service area, last one in this area. Nope, we're moving on to police next, and unless anybody has any more on this. Doesn't look like it. Okay, so why don't we do that? We'll move on to item 6, Police Department and the Police Services Board, and we'll turn it over to the Chief of Police for the presentation. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everyone. So I'll start with an overview of services. So our complement is unauthorized sworn officers of 22. You'll see there that there's two major sections, which are uniform patrol and criminal investigations and drugs. The other duties that you'll see and resources that we provide, community services, high school resource officers, training officers, domestic violence, scenes of crime, crisis negotiators, DRE, and intoxilizer officers, to name a few. Those are jobs that officers in uniform patrol and in criminal investigation do, so they wear many hats. Civilian staff, so that's the other side of the house. You'll see they're responsible for data entry, front office support when people come to the front lobby. Our court clerk, she prepares most of all of our Crown briefs that go over to Walkerton Court. Our niche coordinator, our freedom of information inquiries, records checks. Our administrative support within the police service is actually 2 full-time civilians and 1 part-time civilian. We have 8 auxiliary officers, and our special constables, we have 1 full-time court officer and 4 part-time special constables. One of those special constables fills in for the full-time court special constable, and then the other 3 is something we started this year that they do a number of different duties, and that's eliminated we used to have part-time police officers, so that's eliminated that, and we've replaced them with part-time special constables. They do guarding of prisoners, guarding of mental health patients that aren't violent. They'll help with escorts, that type of thing. So what we used to pay a higher wage for a part-time constable, we now do that with a part-time special constable. We also have jail guards. We have 8 part-time jail guards. So when someone's arrested and they're held in the cells for long periods of time for bail hearings for the next day, we have part-time jail guards that come in and take care of that. Some of the achievements for 2018, we had some retirements this past year, and we were able to replace those officers with one male and one female recruit, one experienced female and one male officer as well, and I think that was much more reflective of our community, so I'm pretty proud of that. Balanced budget this year with the surplus. The numbers will still come in. We should have the final numbers probably in a couple of weeks. We've begun the new facility construction. I've updated all of the general orders. There were a number of antiquated general orders that are now up to speed with current legislation. We also received a grant for a vehicle, a cruiser, as well as an ALPR system, which is automated license plate recognition. So it's actually cameras that read plates as they come down the road, and it will tell you if the VAL tags expired, anything from that to an unlicensed driver to a suspended driver to somebody wanted for something. So we should be rolling that out here probably in the next month or two. We had some internal promotions, both sergeant and inspector. We also instituted a high school resource officer, so we have 2 of those uniform patrol officers that actually go into the high schools, help out staff and get to know the kids as well. And then we also have had a marked improvement in morale over the last year. In 2019, some of our goals are to focus on drug trafficking, human trafficking. We are not immune to things that happen in other jurisdictions. Opioids, we've seen a significant spike in opioids, especially fentanyl and what they call purple fentanyl. So we're going to increase criminal investigations in drugs to combat those specific issues. Enhance our training for intelligence and drug investigations. Road safety awareness and enforcement, that's always an issue in any municipality. Our officers have done an excellent job with that over the last year as well. We're beginning a new program, the KIDS program, which is replacing the old DARE program. And the KIDS program, what that is knowledge, issues, and decisions. And we connect with kids to address a number of things, including youth and law, peer-to-peer, relationships online and social media, drug awareness, and mental health awareness as well. We're also, we began last year actually in some significant officer wellness training, and we'll continue that into 2019 and complete and move into the new facility. Some of the challenges in 2019, of course, are an increased drug presence in our community and the residual spin-off crimes that occur from that, from addiction, from anything from addiction to trafficking. So we're going to pay significant attention to that. Road safety, of course, is always an issue. Distracted driving, speed, and impaired by alcohol and drugs. We did have a spike last year in impaired by drug. Alcohol was reduced a little bit, but the drugs seemed to be higher, and most of those cases were fentanyl, opioids. Our challenges, of course, are increased population, increased calls for service. So from 2017 to 18, our calls actually increased 9%. Staffing, officers dealing with fentanyl. It's very, very dangerous drug that doesn't take much to actually overdose from that. And we'll actually address that in the new facility as well with proper ventilation. And of course, officer wellness as well. Oops. Before I move on to the actual budget, I think, Sue, you have some handouts. Council. So the budget for 2019, what it reflects is to bring the service to the approved strength of 22 sworn officers. From the 22 sworn officers, a sergeant will be assigned to the criminal investigation drug area. And as I mentioned, with the issues that we're having there, they will be assigned at that, along with working with our neighboring police services and the Criminal Intelligence Service of Ontario. The major cost of operating the police service, of course, is tied to salaries and benefits. In 2019, the negotiated salary increase was 1.85%. Only about 8% of the entire budget can be described as discretionary spending, and even some of that portion is essentially fixed cost. Some of the fixed costs include insurance, cleaning supplies, personnel supplies, and utilities that account for approximately 2% of the operating budget. Resultantly, close fiscal management and oversight is maintained in an effort to remain within the service's allotted budgets. You will see that some of the accounts have achieved a 0% increase, and some have increased while others have decreased. I believe the service can operate in 2019 within the limits of those accounts. You will notice that the total police line item on page 47 in your original package was 3733148. There is a request for $117,000. $117,980 that was approved by the police service budget or the police service board, and that is the overall net increase, which is actually 3851128 that you'll see in the handouts that were given to you today.
I'm just going to comment. I'm going to build on what the chief was saying. I just want to explain what you were just handed out and what's in your binder. So in your binder, there is a proposed budget, and it at a number of 3733148. If you add the new request sheet that's on later in about the 117, you add those two numbers together, they match exactly what the Police Services Board overall request is. So those numbers are the same. So what Sue and Mike have distributed is the actual Police Services Board overall request. Those numbers all add up, so it's not going to impact any of the projections that we've made or anything at all like that. There are some lines that are different internally to the police budget. It is Police Services Board approved, but if you take what was printed, just for clarity, we decided yesterday that we would circulate this. So council would have the Police Services Board approved budget clear, and you'd also see that the sheet that shows an increase in staff. It is Police Services Board decision to do that. Council's role is to either approve the budget or not. You don't really debate the ins and outs of the Police Services budget. But the numbers all add up. They're just slightly distributed a different way in the police budget.
Councilor Rich.
Right. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So does that eliminate line F and the additional budget requests at the end? So does that mean that it's no longer that line F there, and this is now implemented as part of this budget?
Yes. This budget that's circulated includes that $117,000. The numbers add up. Yeah.
Council is not empowered to say no to the police services and additional officer. That would be a line item veto on a police services budget, which we cannot do. We can only say yes or no to the total funding envelope. Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just had a question about the new proposed budget in terms of, if you look at the old one, the net transfer to reserves was $23,949, and the new one is $8,949, which is the same as 2018. Is that $8,949 for this year? Is that what it's going to be?
Yes.
Okay. And the same with the difference in the license and leases? It's like a $15,000 difference.
Yeah, that $15,000 difference is actually, if you go down a couple lines, that's a transfer to fleet reserve.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the difference is, there really isn't a difference, it's just in a different line item.
And If I may, I just had one more question going back to the presentation, and could you explain what niche stands for?
Sure. Our niche program, that's our internal, the acronym is just escaping me right now, but niche, basically everything that we enter in, and this is across the province. So when we enter an occurrence in, anything from a traffic ticket to an assault or a domestic or something like that, that computer system actually puts everything together for us to produce a Crown brief that goes to the Crown Attorney's office. And then those records, anyone in the province, any police service in the province can access those records. So if I punch in John Doe, born in 1960, he's not from here, but he's from Ottawa, and he has a lot of occurrences there. Those records are available to me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Rich.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I just have a couple of quick questions. So the first off is with regard to overtime. There's just an expectation that's court costs and the police officers having to come out. You expect $100,000 a year each year for that about?
Yeah, I expect it'll be something like that. I can say that I've reduced overtime significantly in 2018 from a number of different strategies that we've employed. So the thing with overtime is it just takes one case to knock your overtime through the roof. So day-to-day operations, we've changed our focus and changed the way that we're doing things, reduce that, and I'm hoping that I can again do that in 2019, and hopefully there'll be an adjustment into the next year's budget after that.
Oh, that's great. And if I can continue to follow up. The other item I was looking at was benefits. So right now, at the current year to date, we're about $278,000 below budgeted for expenses, and we expect an increase of about another $60,000 over what was budgeted last year. Can you just account for that?
Yeah, for salaries and benefits, that's something that's negotiated between the police association and the board. So that's they negotiate that. Once they negotiate that, that's just a number that's provided to me, that this will be the benefit package, and then that is incorporated.
The real question was, why are we $300,000?
$300,000 less in 2018.
2018 year to date is $375,000, and we budgeted $654. Maybe I'm interpreting that wrong.
No, that's again, those are numbers. Those numbers are not today's numbers. Those numbers are the last I checked are pretty much even at that at what was allotted. You're welcome.
Councilor Schreider.
Thank you. Through you, this is more of a building question, I guess. When do we anticipate moving into the new building?
We anticipate sometime in the fall. We'll take possession of it. We're thinking late summer, early fall.
Yep.
And then there's a number of things that have to be done within the building, furniture, IT, all that type of stuff. The thing with the police building is you can't really move in over time. It has to be, 7 o'clock next Monday, we start business in that building. So a number of things have to occur to make sure that the building is essentially perfect for us to move in, the niche system, the RMS system, everything like that. So I'm hoping in the fall.
Okay.
We're all hoping in the fall, the SMT.
Sure, great. So I guess I just have some questions surrounding maybe what the true actual operating costs of the building that we're in now versus the new building that we're in. So when we look at the utilities budget line, 5,300, right now is the police station tied into the Plex for all of the utilities, which would be electrical, natural gas, water, wastewater?
I can answer that.
Yeah.
Yes, it's all
It's not separate. So, and then the new building, though, will be separate. Okay. I guess with that, then it would be we would get, have a few months in there in 2019 and get what a true operating cost would be on a monthly basis, and then tailor the 2020 budget around that as well.
I can comment on that. As part of the project team mentioned earlier, we have a commissioning expert or a commissioning consultant that is helping us, and when we get further in, they'll be able to do some projections in terms of energy costs and efficiencies, so that will help. We consciously decided, since it'll just be the tail end of 2019, that you'll see the full impact in 20.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anything further? Yeah, Vice Deputy Mayor.
To you, to Chief, if I may. Chief, I'm just wondering, the police service, police community police grant, 0 to October 31st, 2018. I'm assuming the $65,000 is forthcoming soon, correct? That those funds will be arriving. That it hasn't been cut.
No, that's our anticipation. Yeah. And what the ministry did was they changed it from what was called CPP and 1,000 Officer Grant to a new grant called PEM Grant, or it's Police Effectiveness and Modernization. So last year we had an option that we could stay with the CPP and 1,000 Officer Grant. We opted to move to the PEM Grant because that's the future. So I actually wrote to the PEM Grant this year to get ahead of the game, and we've already been allocated those funds. And then in 2019, I'll write to that same grant as well. So we're ahead of the curve there.
So you have to write each year. You have to submit.
Yes, sir.
117,890 is about 3/4 1% tax increase, and we have to talk about blended. Significant amount. We have no say in whether it's approved or not, obviously, but we respect your good judgment and good budgeting. You know how many officers are required in this community to keep us all safe. When's the next new officer? I guess my question is, how do you know? How long have we been underserviced by one officer? We've gone from 12,500 population to 14,500 in the last census, so 2,000. Our population has increased. You know, we're set to go to 16, 17, 18, 19,000. Each time we add an officer, is that very close to that 1%. So, what's the benchmark? What's the number? How do you know? Where do you get your numbers from in terms of? Is it 22 officers today, and then next year we need another one because we add another 1,000 population? What are the numbers? I don't understand how those lines work.
What I do is my decisions are based on evidence-based decisions. So you can. A lot of people will look at what other services are doing. I look internally on what service we provide to the community. So, you know, I can look at other services that are similar size to us that have 35 sworn officers. I look at that and think that's way too high, in my opinion. I look at, you know, this is what the community wants. This is how we can provide it. Are we staying within, you know, a decent budget, which I think we really are here. And, you know, you have to look at population. You have to look at calls for service. You know, a lot of things with calls for service, like I mentioned with the special constable program, part-time special constables, instead of having an officer at a hospital for someone who's been apprehended under the Mental Health Act and have them sit there for hours and hours, or have to call someone in and pay them time and a half to have them guard that person, I can bring in a special constable at quite a reduced rate to have them go in, as long as the person's not violent, and then they can guard them. So these are efficiencies that we look for all the time. For me to say, you know, as population grows, you know, I'm going to be 100% honest with you, which I always am, and of course we're going to need more officers as our population grows. That's going to happen. That exact number, I have to look at that as we progress through the year and make an evidence-based decision that I'll present to the Police Services Board and say, you know, this is why I think we need this extra officer.
How long have we been underserviced by one officer? You arrived just over a year ago, and you looked at the number of officers, services, basket of goods, services we provide. You determined right away that we were underserviced by one?
I did, yeah. Absolutely. There was a lot of calls for service. And, you know, it's difficult to explain, but there's a lot of efficiencies in a police service that you can find by having, you know, one thing, for instance, is I have a part-time special constable now doing fingerprints and photographs, you know, on 2 half days a week. Well, I used to have full-time police officers have to come in and do those and come off the road and then not do what they're supposed to do, frontline policing on the road. So, we build inefficiencies and we save money there by spreading it out through different areas of staff. Do I need frontline police officers? Absolutely. I need boots on the ground to answer emergency calls. That number, will it increase over time? Yes. What that exact number is, I really can't say. I'll have to look at it through the year and take everything into account.
Well, thank you, Chief, for keeping you and your office, your staff, keeping your community safe. Not an easy job, and to our fire services as well, Phil. We have top-notch staff in this community and work very hard on our behalf to keep us all safe. So, thank you for all the great work you do.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, one thing that's important to highlight there is population is one item, but the other item is the issues that the service is facing.
Absolutely.
And I think it's really important for everybody to be clear in terms of this budget. And that additional officer is those items that the chief pointed out during his slide presentation: the opioid crisis, the increased issues with deadly drugs in our community and communities everywhere. This is a concerted effort by the board on the recommendation of the chief to address that issue aggressively. And my own view as a member of the board for the next few days anyway, is that if we were not to address that and enhance our investment to address it, we would fall below what my standard would be of adequacy and effectiveness. And adequacy and effectiveness is what the board is required to achieve, and what the chief is required to achieve in terms of the police service. So I think it's absolutely necessary, and you hear from the community and members of the community all the time about their desire for us to address the opioid issues aggressively. And I have to say that this chief, one of the primary reasons that we hired Chief Belay was because of his extensive expertise in drug enforcement. He understands how to structure the police service in order to achieve drug enforcement and to make sure that the community is as safe as it can be, and that we can be as aggressive against drug criminals as possible. So I'm very confident that this is a needed budget and something that we ought to move forward with. Are there any other further comments on the police services budget? I guess there's the police board budget as well. Chief, if you have any comments on there, if there are any questions from members of the committee on the police board budget. Don't see any, so that's good. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you.
Then we'll move on then to infrastructure. Let me just find my agenda here again. So we're moving on to transportation services, development, engineering, public works, wastewater, sewer, stormwater, water, waste management, and fleet. And the Director of Infrastructure and Development has the report. Amanda.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So infrastructure and development, from your council training, you're aware and knowledgeable of our divisions: engineering, development, public works, environmental services, includes cemetery, garbage, water, storm, wastewater, road maintenance, as well as project management, asset management, GIS services. Over the last year, we have done a lot of work. I would say we have restored some of our maintenance programs that hadn't been done in the past. We've caught up on a bunch of the old reconstruction projects, and we started working on a bunch of master plans. So you'll see here, just based on population growth and the demand of development, we had 1,983 locate requests in 10 months. If you do the quick math to see how busy our locators are, 392 municipal consents, that's 392 times a utility is asked to go into our right-of-way to put servicing in. We had 1,400 requests from the public for service from our Public Works Department, and 84% of those have been closed this year. We have an asset management committee in place, and we're ahead of the curve for where the province needs us to be on our asset management plan and policies. We are looking at our official plan. It's time for the 5-year review. We've completed design guidelines. We took a step ahead last year and asked to look at the growth forecast that was prepared previously and update it. So we've had that. We've shared it with the school board and with the county as well, saying this is how fast we are actually growing. We started on the official plan amendment for the Lamont Outdoor Recreational Facility. We've processed 70 planning applications. This has been the year of 100s, as David said. So in the Lakeshore group of county planning, there was 100 severance or planning applications put through. So that's us and Kincardine. Transportation Master Plan is well underway with almost 400 people responding to our online survey. We had great recognition for our GIS Day, where our GIS department hosted a bunch of high school kids to come and learn about GIS. It was a hands-on day, and it was a well-attended and well-received event. We also scored 100% on our water system for Aqua, and we'll be bringing a nice report and a congratulatory to them to you guys soon as well. Our teamwork, mentorship, and support has been great through the department this year, and it's because we have a dedicated group of people that are exceptional at the work they do every day. So overall, we're seeing more maintenance work, more potholes, more sidewalk cracks, as well as more work being done as our infrastructure ages. We're working to stay ahead of this while being conscious of budgets through our capital program. We're replacing currently based on need, but with our new asset management plan, we'll be able to be more proactive in the future. For this, we continue to work on the necessary master plans to get a better understanding moving forward. So that would be the development charges, the wastewater water master plan, those drainage master plan, and those. Our challenges for this coming year continue to be things such as manual meter reads in Southampton, the unpredictability of weather for winter control, the unprecedented growth and the need for accurate forecasts, being ahead of the game, making sure our infrastructure is in the ground before the subdivision comes online. The increased population results in increased maintenance demands and requests of our public works staff. As well, we have aging infrastructure and we have insufficient provincial funding for that rehabilitation of the work.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the slide presentation before we move into the service areas? Vice Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Amanda or David, perhaps. On two of your slides, one was the update of the zoning bylaw, projected start date and completion date for our zoning bylaw.
So it's not a full update of the zoning bylaw. It's the pieces that we need. So it's the same as this past year through the year as the zoning bylaw groups need to be done. Then we're going to be updating them. So it'll be throughout the year.
Throughout the year, so to be completed by the end of 2019, you're saying?
Correct. And through you, similar to in 2018, we had comprehensive zoning bylaw updates. I think we did them twice this past year, and
Okay.
it'll be the same.
And my second question was, Amanda, new tools for affordable housing successes. Could you explain what that means?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, as one of the additional funding requests, you're going to see the official plan update in accordance with or specific to affordable housing. So what we want to have are incentive bonusing programs and policies in place that would encourage, almost maybe enforce the application of affordable housing into our development.
Further, the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Amanda, I just want to compliment your staff. They've done a great job this year. I'm really looking forward to seeing what our GIS services can do. I really like the potential partnership they've created with the high school. It gives the students a higher level of programming potential projects. And I know when the kids came back, they're very excited at the stuff they've done. And I've talked with members of your staff that there could be some more projects that we can get going with the high school to help out. And it's good to know that we're working so hard on our asset management plan. When we go to our AMO training, they say asset management. And knowing that we're above average in getting our plan created and implemented is good to know. Well done.
Further questions on the slide presentation? I was just wondering, I guess in furtherance to what the Deputy Mayor just said, that your comment there about the 2019 goal of enhancing the AMP, that your intent then, and you have the resourcing that prepared to achieve the specific targeted date that we have to achieve in 2019 of implementing the strategic asset management plan under Ontario regulation. We have to have that up and running by July 1 or something of this year, and then further steps after that over the next 4 or 5 years. So I guess we're we're well on the road to achieving that, and we have the resourcing in this budget to achieve that.
Yes, and through you, back to you. We have to have the policy in place by July 1st. Last year we were successful in the FCM funding, so not that many people got the funding, and Laura wrote such an excellent application that we were able to get a significant amount of funding. So we have our GIS staff and Laura as our asset management person, plus we have the money to hire consultants to get us through the policy for sure, and then we're looking at the risk and everything else as the year progresses.
That really is worth highlighting that the county was denied that funding. Like you say, it was very few people received it, so certainly some good work by Laura and your entire department. Is there any other comments on this, or we'll work our way down here? Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, looking through your presentation, it occurs to me that a number of the highlights, certainly, and even in the budget lines, sort of straddle the line between operating and capital, like building of columbariums, or we put new pipes in the ground, or we bridge replacement. Those, say, you're replacing a bridge, that's operations, but then you could say it's capital too. How do you differentiate somebody's wages and then, or maybe expenses, how they allocate it to capital, how they allocate it to operation in your budget?
Through you, there's two definitions that I follow. The first is that if it's unique, a one-time expense, then it's capital, not operating. Plus, to be in a capital budget, you have to be able to sell it, so it has to be an asset. So a master plan, even though I'm going to do it once, it can't be capital, so it goes under operating. A columbarium, the time that I buy it would be capital, but all the work I do to keep it up would be maintenance. A pipe, for example, if it's a new pipe going in the ground, then it's capital. If I go to do video of it and all those things, then it becomes
operating. Are there further comments? Councillor Smith. Yep.
Question related to a budget line item regarding overtime. So 2018 year to date is in and around 5,000 with a budget of 13,000, but we're projecting 22,000, almost 23 for 2019. Can you explain the projection?
Well, a lot of that was the reallocation that Sue talked about before to actuals. So we have two staff members that are in the field in the summer that do inspection, construction, layout. They save us from using consultants by doing that. So they have a 35-hour work week. When they work in the summer, they work additional hours to that. That goes into the overtime for that.
And so I guess if I could just add, I understand the theory behind it, but what is the justification for the significant increase in 2019? In other words, that's when the change is occurring in the budget allocation? Is that?
Sorry, and a lot of this I have to defer to Sue on how the...
Yeah, so I looked at how we were doing budget-wise, differences. I noticed that there was overtime being allocated, and that I wanted to try to align the budget lines to where the expenses were actually going to fall.
That's a good segue. We can start working our way right into the individual service areas. So why don't we start with item A, engineering, and ask members if they have any specific questions or comments with regard to the engineering department. Vice Deputy Mayor.
Through you to Amanda. Amanda, line 6,354.10, you're going from 199,000 to 45,000, so it's a $155,000 difference reduction. And I'm assuming that that's due to the fact that roads and roadside maintenance has increased. I'm jumping ahead to 57, but $300,000 increase in roads and roadside maintenance. Is there a connection between the $300,000 increase in roads and roadside maintenance to that number right there, engineering and road needs? Is that connected?
No, they're not. The decrease in the AMP and roads needs is taking the transportation master plan out. So in 2018, that's where the line item for that consultant was. So we're not doing that 125,000 from last year.
Okay. Well, I'll talk about roads and roadside later. We get to it. Okay.
Anything further on the engineering service area? Okay, let's then move on to development services. Questions or comments with regard to development services? Then we'll move on to Public Works Administration. Questions or comments with regard to Public Works Administration service area? See any? So we'll move on to road and roadside maintenance. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Amanda, this to you, Mr. Mayor, to Amanda. I don't understand the $300,000 increase in 2018-2019 roads and roadside maintenance. It's with $300,000 is a significant number, and I've gone through this budget. I thought maybe I found $155,000 of it with a reallocation, but why the $300,000 increase? I don't. That's a huge amount. So why that size?
So some of the increases, there's loose top maintenance. We increased by $5,000. That was just because of what we're seeing in how much we're going out on the gravel roads. We increased more for the tree sale this year. We have had such a big intake, and we're turning so many people away from the trees that has gone up. Plus, we're getting more funding from Bruce Power, so we've balanced that out a bit more. I'm just trying to see the wages and that as I go line by line. So health and safety wages were put back in. We put more into wages for trees because that's another one where we're having a lot of requests. Then you'll see that the majority of the changes is because the vacation benefits, all those things for our on-the-ground crew were in roads admin before, and now we've allocated it to their cost center instead. So roads admin now is truly just the administrative staff for the Public Works group, and their benefits, their health and safety, those things. Now the 26 crew members, their benefits, vacation and stuff are under this cost center. Make sense? So we've moved it from a roads admin cost center to here for vacation, sick and stuff.
Okay, I guess I just don't. I'm not getting it. I still don't see 300 grand.
I'll jump in here if I can.
Yep.
This is an area I think we've identified, and we're happy to go back. We've reallocated wages. So, Vice Deputy Mayor, you asked us a similar question for strategic initiatives, and we did the reconciliation for you. You asked us about recreation. We did the reconciliation for you, and we're happy to do them. You asked us about administration. We did the reconciliation for you. All of that was we did yesterday. Today we haven't had the opportunity to do the reconciliation. All of those other ones balanced, so we have no doubt that this will balance as well. You're entitled to ask the question, and we'll give you the answer. But I don't want Amanda figuring out on the fly. It's a valid question. We need time to respond to it. All of the other questions we responded to, and they all balanced fine. So I have no doubt this will balance. So we'll do that and get you the information. Okay.
I think it would be interesting because so much has changed in terms of wages and benefits across all of these service areas. For if the administration could generate the global picture of where wages and benefits across the corporation were in 2018 and where they are in 2019 against where they will be in 2019, that will give council a better way to get a sense of what's changed and what hasn't changed. I mean, that's the problem now. When you take it just piece by piece, it's hard to tell. But if you saw the whole picture, my guess is you'd see that it's just a normal. It's probably the 2.75% increase across the corporation, and that's about what the change has been, right?
Yeah, well, there is more change to that, and certainly we're happy to do that. As I mentioned, we did that for community services, for the Vice Deputy Mayor. We did it for administration, and we've done it for strategic initiatives. So we are currently working on infrastructure and development. It is more than just, so there's no new staff. It is the economic adjustment. There's step increases, there's benefit increases, there's a number of them. But we can do that reconciliation.
Share that with all of council. That would be good. Councillor Grace, and then we'll get Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amanda, my question involves both page 58 and page 77. on page 58, the first line talks about, it's 5320, 3300 green cones. Is that referring to the green cones that are used to process food waste?
That's correct. So they're a type of composter.
Okay. So has that now down, is that now down to zero because it's covered under waste management composters on page 77, line 5450, 3300?
That's correct.
Okay. And so if I could ask another question on that, do we sell those now?
We've got, I have a quote to bring them back in, the same with getting more composters, because we've run out of the black composters as well, so that will come back to council, showing that we're going to be purchasing those two things. They will be cost neutral. We're not proposing a subsidy on them.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Smith.
So I understand there was a request made for more accurate year-to-date figures, and due to some software limitations, we're unable to provide those. But among some other budget line items, the bridges and culverts were significantly underspent. Is there year-to-date 2018 of a $50,000 budget? We're at 14.5. Are we anticipating getting anywhere close to that 50? And I see a reduction for the 2000, and I assume that column should be 2019 proposed budget.
So through you, Mr. Yes, last in 2017 we'd planned on doing a bunch of culvert work. When we got to one of the culverts, we found it was too large for our crew to do, so we did it under a different GL line. So we won't be reaching the 50,000 on that. For 2019, we've reduced culverts as well because we're not as much work on there. But you'll see there's an increase in some of the other areas, like the catch basin cleaning and the debris as well, ditching.
The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Amanda. Do you foresee any problems completing the projects that you have scheduled this year and the few that we have held over from last year with getting out the requests, the proposals, getting our workers budgeted in?
Through you, Mr. Do you mean capital projects or operations projects?
I guess that would fall under capital, wouldn't it? All our road projects and
yeah, I
that's
would
capital.
think so.
Sorry, thank you.
Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is around the, I see at least three items under loose top maintenance. One's 45,000, 85,000, and 39,500. So we're at about $160,000, $170,000 a year on loose top maintenance for what I see as a relatively few number of kilometers. We've got Blind Line, and we've got a few side roads, 18, 19, and 13, 14, that have sections. Concession 2 has a few sections of loose top maintenance, and I'm not to take away from the excellent work that the roads crew do at maintaining those loose top roads, but at what point through, when we do continual operational maintenance on loose top roads, do we get to the decision-making point that says maybe it's time to pave that road? Norfolk, Alice come into mind as a couple that may be eligible for that as loose top roads. Where do we get the tipping point between we're putting gravel and calcium and grading time into these roads every year? Maybe it's time to cut our losses and put a capital project in to pave them.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we actually just recently went and did an analysis of the cost of maintaining loose top versus hard top, because we have a boundary agreement with neighboring municipalities, and it's cheaper to maintain a loose top road than a hard top. So we could pave everything. It would cost us more as the maintenance of that goes forward. When it looks at the class 1 or class 2 roads, it's based on the service and the need of that road. If a development application was to come through on a class 1 road, then we would ask the developer to increase it, or they would do a traffic impact study to see if that was needed. But until then, we don't foresee changing any of our loose top roads to pavement.
Anything further on roads and roadside maintenance? See nothing. Why don't we move then on to winter control? Comments or questions on winter control? Councillor Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So with winter maintenance, that's where we are. Yeah. So I accidentally hit traffic control. We seem pretty low as of October. Doesn't seem like it's been a bad winter. How are we doing?
Where are we for year end? The short answer is I don't have that one. Oh, here it is. So we are over by about $60,000 this past for 2018. 60, yeah.
Okay, any further questions on winter
May I add to that? We have a winter control reserve to take the ups and downs of winter control as well. So last year we saw a lot of salt and sand being needed because of how we had the freeze thaw. And this year we didn't have to do a lot of plowing in December. We had to put a lot of sand down. You can see that on the roads because of the freezing rain.
Okay, for Councillor Smith.
So I see that there was an adjustment made in the overtime budget for 2019, but there wasn't for salt and sand. Or we just were predicting or basing the balance of plowing versus salt and sand, right? We had a significant overage in the salt and sand 2018, and that's as of October 31st. Sorry, I'll let you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we ordered extra winter sand last year, and that's what the overage is from there. So this year we don't need to order that winter sand because we did it early in 2018.
Further comments about winter control? Seeing none, let's move on to traffic control. Questions or comments with regard to traffic control? Any questions around traffic control? So why don't we move on to streetlights? Any questions on the streetlight service area? Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amanda, I did send a request or two through you for 2019 for streetlights, and it was specifically Miramichi Bay Road here on the street and down on Saugon Beach Road at the south end. And I think your response back to me was that you'll have someone go out during evening hours and take a look at streetlights. And was that done? And will the report be coming to council at some point, or just an operational thing where you're just going to go ahead and do it with adding new streetlights in areas where we feel there should be new streetlights? Because you have some requests on file from members of the public. So.
Mr. Mayor, we have. We're working with our electrician to go through. Again, we want it to be in the dark when there's no leaves on the trees for them to go through these dark areas that have been identified in the service request. So that hasn't been done. He was on vacation for the month of December, so that's something that he'll be doing in the new year.
Amanda, is this the budget though over streetlights? I see like a lot of it's hydro, but is it will this show up for new streetlights under the next budget on October 22nd for new lighting under capital? Is that where it would show up?
So, Mr. Mayor, do you mean January 22nd of this year, or next?
Did I say January 22nd, or what did I say? But yeah, January 22nd for a capital budget meeting?
No, it wouldn't be done on in that quickly. What we would do is we would do the analysis and then look at new streetlights as a capital project for the 2020 budget.
Councillor Schreier.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, are all of the street lights LED retrofit through the municipality now?
Yes, they are.
They are. So we're seeing in the materials your budget has decreased then over those years, so that we're seeing those indirect cost savings. We're not really seeing the cost savings though under the utilities. Are we tracking that and just looking to see, because I do understand that when we do retrofits that we have direct versus indirect, and that a lot of the savings won't necessarily be in the invoice itself or the utility consumption. It would be in staff wages and the materials and repairs and things like that. So I guess I'm just asking, are we tracking that, and are we seeing the benefit to that retrofit program? Thank you.
So through you, and it was before my time, but from what I've been told from my predecessors is what happened is that we put the money out, did the LED conversion, and then the electrical rates doubled. So we actually didn't see a line item change because the rates went up, but we didn't bear the brunt of that increase in utility rates. So that's where most of the cost savings were. The materials in that is honestly fixing streetlights. A lot of it comes down when we do the pole trend conversion. There's different things that get done with that as well in a capital program. That's the most of the work we're doing on the streetlights. These are going and fixing burnt out streetlights and where a wire has been clipped and those sort of, or in a car accident when someone goes and knocks the streetlight down, we have to go put it back up.
Right. I think what would be interesting from a utility consumption perspective, just to see that we are actually reducing that consumption, is on our utility bills where we have, I'll call them controlled costs, which would be our consumption itself versus uncontrolled costs, or our service deliveries, or those fixed rates perhaps than what we have. But if we could track perhaps, or look at maybe tracking what our actual consumption is, because I think that, we'll find what that percentage, a very low 13-15% of our utility bill is actually what our consumption is, but that would be what we would want to track in order to show those cost savings.
It's interesting, when we originally approved the LED conversion, the financial model showed that at that time the cost savings in electricity would completely offset that transfer to future capital reserve, that $105,000 that you see there. And as you can see, it hasn't been offset. It's still on the budget because of the increase in electricity rates. And the important way to look at that is that it's actually a massive savings, because if we hadn't made the conversion, we would be paying an additional $105,000 probably in those costs. So it was still, although it has increased our costs have increased at a slower rate than they might otherwise have done. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
And I think Councillor Schreider, it's a very good point. I specifically remember that presentation. It was a 7-year payback at that time from our Director of Public Works. Came in and sold the idea about LED, and it was 7 year. But Mayor's absolutely correct. With rates doubling, there's still significant savings, albeit it's not at zero where we were told it would go to. But because of the huge increase, it didn't happen. But it was 7 years. That was about.
Any further questions on the streetlight service area? Doesn't look like it, so why don't we move then on to wastewater? Questions on wastewater? Don't see any questions on wastewater, so why don't we move on to stormwater? Questions on the stormwater service area? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Should we be holding our questions on rate increase until the end when we get to that, or could we address that now?
I think you can address it now. It's part of the budget.
Thank you. Through you. I have a question, Amanda, just about something I read about the about legislation from the province that says that water and wastewater systems must operate on the basis of a full cost recovery rate structure with no subsidies provided. Is that something that applies to us?
Mr. Mayor, yes, it does. And our wastewater and water units are cost neutral. So you'll see the total for wastewater and water are zero, but stormwater is different. Stormwater falls under the roads, and we don't have a stormwater utility here.
Okay, if I could ask a follow-up. So when we look at the proposed 8% increase in our water rates, would you say that that's due to this legislation? Is that an effect of that?
No, that legislation's been in place for a number of years now. That 8% increase is due to our analysis through the financial plan, which will come back to you as well. In order to pay for the projects that we're proposing in the next 5 years, a rate increase is needed to be able to fund those projects.
Thank you.
Further questions with regard to stormwater? Don't see any, so why don't we move that on to water? Water service area, are there any questions with regard to water? Not just water in general, but water in terms of the service area. No? Okay. Yeah, sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Through you to Amanda, with our increased population in the summertime, do we have the capability to meet the needs of the water demand?
Through Mr. Mayor, absolutely, we have the ability to meet the needs. I'm not sure if you're referring to not having any water bans, or if you mean...
That was my next question, yes.
We meet the needs, but I use the analogy all the time of you can't design a water system the same. You design a water system the same as you would design a church parking lot. You don't design it for Christmas Eve. You have to design it for 80%. So through the year, we are using 40 to 60% of our capacity at the water plants. When we get to those 2 weeks in July, when everyone's watering their lawns, we're getting close to 90 to 100% of the capacity, and we don't want to reach that. So then we put the water ban on, and you'll fall back down to 80% capacity. So we are clearly in the ability to run a safe drinking system to provide pressure, water, and fire protection all year round.
The increased population is sustainable with that?
Yes, and you'll see this coming year we're doing the water wastewater master plan. So this is the year where it's time to be renewed. So the next set of years up, I think, to 31 is being reviewed in 2019.
Thank you.
It's very important to be clear that new subdivisions cannot be approved for development unless our water treatment capacity is able to meet those additional needs. So all of the draft plan approved homes in the town of Saugeen Shores, if they have gone that far, are within our treatment capacity, our potential treatment capacity to service. And so it's very important for the public to know that as the community grows, that growth has been well planned for beginning years ago to ensure that we can indeed service that safely. Are there any further questions or comments with regard to water? None then, why don't we move on to garbage collection? Questions or comments with regard to garbage collection? Councillor Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's always good at this point to remind ourselves that we did contract that service out over the last, was it 2 or 3 years ago? And it has proven to be a success. I think that's one of the good things that we've done. And the other thing to remember is that we own the company that does the garbage services, Basra. So we're a part owner of that company, which in turn does help to reduce the recycling costs for each individual member of our community.
Thank you for those comments. Further comments, questions with regard to garbage collection? Any? So we'll move on then to waste management. Questions or comments with regard to waste management? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Amanda. Looking at other communities, I wonder if we'd be able to do an assessment of our fee rates. I believe our tipping fees are too low. I've done a study myself where I could take 8 bags out for $5. I think our tipping fees need to be raised, and the amount given, so from 100 maybe to 150 pounds, as well as our rates for unsorted materials. I understand in other communities they pay double to triple the amount. If you come in to ours, you pay one rate. If you don't sort it, you don't sort it, and that's left up to us. So I wonder if you'd be able to do an assessment of fee study for that and bring that back to us.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have just so you know, we do have a difference of sorted and unsorted, but we are seeing that the cost difference is not making people sort. So yes, we see that as an important thing. For the fees and charges that are in your budget right now, we've only increased by 2.5%, but we can commit to doing a financial plan to come up with a better tipping fee schedule.
Yeah, looking at other, sorry, Mr. Mayor, through you, looking at other communities, a $10 tipping fee for 150 pounds is pretty reasonable compared to surrounding municipalities. So if you could do that assessment and bring it back to us, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
I have made a request of the administration to add some discussion at the end of the meeting around some service level changes for waste management. So that's an item, I think it's on the agenda for discussion. So it's that'll be an item that's going to come back later in the day as well. So if there's nothing, oh, sorry, Councillor Schreier.
Just one quick question through you. What's the life expectancy of the landfill right now, and I guess how much land we have around that, or what's the plan moving forward for expansion?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the last report we had from 2018 said we have 19 years left in our landfill, so that does not account for what was used in 2018. We also purchased the land adjacent to the landfill already, so that has come out of the expansion reserve. So now that we're at the 19, we're starting to look at an expansion plan so that we have that ready to go when we're needing it. So I would imagine starting it now, in 15 years, we'll be ready to have a new landfill going.
Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So pursuant to that point, Amanda, about the expectation of life of the landfill, I know that things are changing in recycling, that more materials are going to be going into the landfill that now can be recycled, and is that something that you're going to be assessing? That factor going to be part of your assessment going forward?
Mr. Mayor, yes, that is a factor. There's a lot of regulations that are changing. They're looking at limiting organics to landfills. They're looking at making recycling a producer responsibility for paying for those things. We're also looking at markets closing, so we don't have a place to put styrofoam. We're losing the ability to do mattress recycling just as easy. And because we're isolated, there's a lot of product that we can't currently recycle, like Tetra Paks and plastic bags and those. But all those sort of things need to go into this assessment. And that's one of the reasons why we have a grinder, is because we need to take a lot of those materials that easily fly away and get them packed down. So that's all in the analysis.
Further questions or comments with regard to waste management? So why don't we move on to recycling? Questions or comments with regard to recycling? I wonder maybe at this stage, Amanda or perhaps Sue or David, if somebody could just, for the benefit of particularly our new members of council, just run down how these three items, garbage collection, waste management, and recycling, all work together financially. It would it often looks like often a little harder to understand, so maybe you could just explain that.
Sure. The three areas have to combine to be a zero balance on the tax dollar. So our landfill tipping fees will offset the cost of the garbage collection contract and the Baza recycling contract. So you'll see that recycling costs us money every year and garbage collection costs us every year, but the landfill makes us money. So the difference between the expenses and the revenue in those two things go into our expansion reserve. So we have a plan of how much money we want to have in that reserve. We plan for that in our budgets, and if we get less tipping fees, then not as much goes into the reserve. But what we're seeing right now is our tipping fees are more than we are budgeting for, and all that surplus is going into for expansion.
Okay, are there questions or comments with regard to the recycling service area? Everybody's turning their pages, so I guess not. We'll move on then to fleet. Are there questions or comments with regard to the fleet service area? Councillor Smith.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just a question related to line item 0163309300. There's a 2019 proposed budget line item of $585,000. Can you explain that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't mind answering that. At the end, there is a request coming to increase that number. We know that the transfer to reserve is not.
Can I just, that description is incorrect. That should be transferred to capital reserve. I just realized.
Further questions or comments with regard to the fleet? Being none, then why don't we move on to the cemetery? Questions or comments with regard to the cemetery service area? Yes, the Deputy Mayor.
This may not be able to be answered, but to Amanda, with the Southampton cemetery erosion that's occurring on the banks, how are we doing it, looking at what we can do to offset that?
So through Mr. Smith, at the Pioneer Cemetery, that is something that I'm working with the archaeologist, the Ministry of the Environment, SVCA, and the Ministry of Heritage to work out. It's been a number of years, but we need to set up a meeting with those groups and come up with a solution. It would come back as a capital project.
Even the erosion along the roadside there, I know it's getting pretty close to the guardrails, so that all comes under capital.
It does come back through capital. Right now we're continuing monitoring it, so the engineering staff goes out and surveys the top of slope, and we're watching how close it is. That's going to require an EA process for an opening of a road to be able to close that road, that system. So that is something that I haven't looked at putting in the 2019 budget because it was in the 2016 budget. So it's one of those projects that needs to be picked up and carried forward.
Yeah, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
It's not a big item, but I'm just wondering, Amanda, the full-time salaries for cemetery are dropped. Why the change in drop in salary?
Through Mr. Mayor, we allocated part of the cemetery managers to weeds. So he does weed control as well.
Further questions or comments on the cemetery? Seeing none, why don't we move on to the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority? We'll plow through the last two here in transportation services, and then we'll break for lunch. Are there questions with regard to the Conservation Authority? Don't see any, so we'll move on then to transit, the last one. Any questions with regard to the Saugeen Mobility Regional Transit Service? If I can ever find it. There it is. Yeah, the Deputy Mayor.
With Saugeen Transit and our smart services and listening to going through the election, the biggest need, and one of the biggest needs in town, is a transportation system in town to be able to get people from one end of the town out to the other end, specifically to the shopping malls, one from south end to get to Independent, north end to get to Walmart area. Is there any way that we can work with SMART to maybe create a once or twice a week transfer system, or is it SMART tied up in other things?
I think next Monday we'll be making appointments to boards, and so one of you lucky folks will be serving on the Saugeen Mobility Regional Transit Service, and certainly that's an item that our representative there could raise. I'd also point out that the county is working on, at least in the preliminary stages of working on some innovative stuff around transit and working with some third-party providers to try to figure out how we might be able to do transit better across the region. So there are some irons in the fire, but certainly, that's an item that our representative at SMART could probably carry forward on behalf. Councillor Grace, and then we'll get Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could just respond to the Deputy Mayor's question. At one of the meetings, I was a sub on that committee for Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt, and that particular issue actually came to a vote in the committee last spring, I guess, and it failed. The question was, can we provide services beyond the current mandate, which is for individuals with, disabilities? And I'm not saying it can't go forward again, but that's my memory of where that board is right now.
Thanks for that update. Councillor Smith.
I would, through you, Mr. Mayor, I would just like to commend, I quite like this replacement schedule that's been included in the Saugeen Mobility package, and I'm wondering if something like that could be provided for example, fleet, so we could have a line of sight to the minor fixed asset. Is that something that we're able to provide?
Yeah. Everybody's nodding their head. So yes. Is there anything more on SMART? Sure, because we could sit here a few more minutes if you want before lunch. All right. We'll break. How long should we break for lunch? 45 minutes? So why don't we reconvene at 10 to the hour?